The young man was lying in a hospital bed. His arm and leg were in a cast, and 4 was placed on his forearm. There was a stool next to it. The window was open. An airplane was flying by outside the window. He woke up. The hero did not understand what had happened to him. The young man asked himself that, really, he was back. At his school, the bullies had their eyes on him and constantly bullied him. They beat him up and laughed at him. The young man was lying on the floor. He didn't have the courage to stand up to them, so he hated himself. He hated the people who turned a blind eye to what was happening. He also hated the lowly self as much as he hated his abusers. He had always dreamed of a chance to change his life. It was already night. The young man lay in his bed and cried. The hero was reflecting on life, and, suddenly, someone greeted him. The young man was puzzled. He opened his eyes and saw that he was sitting on a magic circle around which nuns were gathered. The women were praying. One of them, who greeted him, called him Messiah Sama. The young man hurriedly excused himself that was not his name at all. His name was Yamato Takeru. He thought then that being reborn in another world was his chance. Yamato sat up. In front of him was a man who was telling him something. It turned out that in this world, there was an entity called a demon lord. This entity made people suffer. The young man realized that someone like him, who also couldn't answer his abusers, didn't think he could risk his life to fight the demon lord, but still it happened. He began to be trained in magic. After many attempts, he succeeded in creating flames. The hero shouted that he was finally able to do it. The girl was amazed. The girl who was sent Edelweiss said that it was a big step forward. Yamato smiled. He wanted to try to accept himself in this world. He promised he wouldn't give up this time. Time passed and he had already started fighting monsters, destroying each one in his path. He didn't back down and then he did his best. A demon lord stood in his way and they had a duel. And the result was that he was about to be executed. On a dais in the town square stood the executioner, and the prime minister along with the imprisoned Yamato. The prime minister said that, from now on, in the name of God, they were executing the monster Yamato Takeru. People started pointing their fingers at him and made angry remarks. The man went on to say that there was a hidden power in the foreigner that could defeat the demon lord. He added that before he gave the human race and destroyed their world, they had to deal with it. There were shackles on the young man's hands. He thought that these shackles were sealing magic. Yamato thought it was possible to say no thanks because he was treated like an animal. The man asked him what he could say last. Yamato remained silent. Someone in the crowd shouted that they should kill him quickly because he was too dangerous. Yamato raised his head and looked at them. The people were frightened. They heard from the crowd that they needed to blow his head off faster. The young man closed his eyes. He was fully prepared to accept his fate. Yamato replied that he was fed up with it all. The prime minister said that it was clear then. At the end, he said goodbye to the hero. The executioner raised his sword and was about to kill Yamato. The girl's voice was heard from the crowd. It was Saint Edelweiss. She was screaming and crying. The saint was trying to break through the crowds and stop the execution. The young man noticed this. The hero looked at the saint and was surprised. He thought that whether it was Japan or this world, he had never been able to get himself accepted. Yamato began to laugh. He was pleased that there was a man who was shedding tears for him. Yamato was sure that his life was supposed to be a happy one. He no longer existed in this world. Opening his eyes, he saw the ceiling of the hospital room. His arm and leg were in a cast, and 4 was connected to his left wrist. The hero could not believe his eyes. He asked himself that, was this really a hospital in Japan? Outside the window, birds flew by. Yamato asked himself over and over again that he was back again. He said he was dead then. The hero reached out a bandaged hand to his face. The young man asked himself that, had those 3 years really just been a dream? A pair of birds perched on the open window. Yamato tried to sit up. He told himself that there was no point in racking his brain with things he couldn't understand. He managed to sit up on the bed. Yamato thought he should have found out what was happening to him here first. The hero turned to the window and looked at himself. He didn't recognize himself. A scream was heard coming from his room. He asked who it was. The nurses looked over at each other. The young man tried to stand up. He succeeded, but the next moment he fell. The hero heard a crunch. He thought that several bones had been broken. The young man brought his right hand to his heart. He cast a general healing spell. A mysterious ray of light appeared around him. The spell worked. He tried to stand up. The hero said the pain was gone. The young man pulled himself up. He thought that the fact that he could still use magic meant that none of this was a dream. The hero asked himself mentally what if he was asleep right now. He walked over to the mirror and looked into it. There he saw a complete stranger. A woman had broken into the room, screaming and calling for Takeru. She was crying. The doctor tried to stop her. The woman hugged him. She screamed that he was finally awake. The doctor was worried about the patient. The doctor said he had a bunch of broken bones. He asked the young man how he could even move. The young man was embarrassed. He figured that this woman was probably the mom of whoever had owned this body before, and the man next to him must have been the doctor. The moms were asking who had done this to him. The hero realized he couldn't talk directly about the bullies, so he decided to cite memory loss. Hero asked that he was playing with his friends on the roof of the school, and then the fence broke and he slipped and fell. The young man moved his arm to stretch it out. The young man was at a doctor's appointment. His mother was sitting next to him. The doctor asked what he remembered, that his name was Kusanagi Takeru. The hero hesitantly agreed. The doctor palpated and examined the sick man. He said he couldn't believe that all his serious injuries had just disappeared. The doctor asked if he knew that it was quite impossible for an experienced healer to do that. The doctor continued to examine the hero. The young man asked himself that even though this was another world, there were healers here. The office door was opened by a man who excitedly called out to Takeru. Mom turned around. It was Takeru's dad. The young man asked himself that it was Takeru's dad. The man hugged the hero from behind. He was crying. The young man was puzzled. Mom joined them as well. Dad said that even though Takeru didn't remember them, he was happy that his son was alive. The young man realized that the real Kusanagi Takeru was surrounded by love. He didn't know what was going on here, but the hero promised that he would find a way to return his body to him. The young man asked the real Kusanagi Takeru to wait. One last time at the hospital, they took tests from him. The results showed that he was healthy, so he was quickly discharged. The family stood at the door of the hospital. They thanked the doctor and said their goodbyes. Dad got behind the wheel and Mom sat next to him. Takeru sat in the back seat. He thought the machinery in the hospital looked a little more futuristic than what he had seen before. The young man realized that since everyone spoke Japanese, it had to be Japan. The young man looked out the window. He thought that still, the city opened up scenery he wasn't used to seeing. The hero thought that when he was in Japan as Yamato Takeru, it was the year 2000. He asked himself that maybe he had been thrown into the future. Mom turned on the news. A news program started. The anchor said that today was the last day of May. He continued that the hot spring of 2040 was about to come to an end. The young man did not believe what he heard. The anchorman continued that they had saved many lives today too. The presenter said that they were hunters who risked their lives every day to protect people. The hero's gaze changed. He watched the news that showed footage of the monster battle scene. He asked himself that, were it really the ogres and goblins? The young man didn't understand why they were attacking in this world and not the other. Dad said that the hunters were doing just incredible things. He added that he wanted to be one of them. Mom was scared and tried to bring him down to earth. She said he was too clumsy, he would be torn apart in a heartbeat. Dad quietly agreed with her. Takeru glanced forward. The young man watched carefully at all the footage that was shown about the hunters. The hero thought that these hunters fought using magic as if it was the norm. It seemed to him that even though this was Japan, it was similar to that world. A crack in the air appeared in front of the car. The family was startled. Dad barely managed to stop the car. The young boy thought that things were really bad. He decided to activate his magic. The hero shouted a guardian defender spell. The car managed to dodge. It crashed into the sidewalk. Passing people looked at all of this. The crack was getting bigger. They got out of the car. Dad looked at his hands. Takeru helped Mom out of the car. He asked if they were okay. Dad asked himself that it didn't hurt. He answered his son that they were fine. Takeru said he was glad everyone was in one piece. His attention was now turned to the crack in the sky. He remembered seeing something like that in another world. He said it was bad because it was a spatial rift. They looked at the rupture with terror in their eyes, from which monsters began to emerge. The young man thought it was like a summoning spell. Monsters were appearing from the spatial rift. He recognized these monsters. They were orcs. Even a few good knights in the service of the crown might not be enough to defeat them. An ordinary person didn't stand a chance against such monsters. The young man thought that if it was about him, he could deal with them quickly. The monsters started attacking people and the frightened people started running away to save themselves. The hero remembered the moment of his execution, how people wanted him to die soon. He felt sad. He told himself that the one who stood out a lot was always the first to die. He pondered that not to mention that this body belonged to Kusanagi Takeru, and not him, so if he stood out, he would end up having to return the body. The owner of the body might have more trouble because of that. His parents were running away, but he was still standing in his place. Mom shouted that she should have run away faster. Dad yelled that he should have run away too. The ogre was about to hit the young man. Takeru thought that he didn't want to stand out anymore. Takeru thought it would be better if he ran away. The ogre had almost reached the parents. Takeru's gaze changed. He saw the scene. The ogre's paw almost grabbed the parents. He used a spell to protect them. The spell was called Explosive Flash. His magic was able to destroy the monster in one blow and save his parents. Dad hugged Mom, thus shielding her from the impact. After the monster was destroyed, Takeru ran up to his parents. He asked if they were okay. The parents were horrified. After a silence, Dad replied that they were in one piece. Takeru explained that a hunter running by had managed to deal with the monster. He added that they had to get out of here faster. They got up to leave. The young man took one last look at the monster. He thought that he had used his power after all. He was glad that he was able to save the couple. An unfamiliar energy appeared next to the slain monster. The hero realized that there was someone else's after his attack. The young man pondered what it could have been. Meanwhile, on the roof of one of the neighboring buildings stood a girl who had yet to complete the spell. Takeru saw the girl. He thought that this could have added a lot of trouble for him. It was already nighttime. They were returning home on foot. Dad crossed his arms over his chest and said that the car was totaled, but it was good that they survived. He added that they were truly very lucky because they had gotten into such trouble and had no casualties. Takeru laughed. Mom pointed to the house and said that they had come. Mom said it was to his house. Mom smiled and added that it was good for him to come home. Takeru watched carefully and remained silent. He figured if he wanted to spend time like Kusanagi, he needed more information. The hero was already in Kusanaga's room. He thought that he had done this once too. The young man looked for the diary, but he couldn't find it. He thought that frankly, if he found adult journals here, it would be more fun. He looked at the journal that was lying on the table. On the table was a hunter magazine. The young man concluded that it seemed like Takeru was a big fan of hunters because all the books in the room were about them. He looked and leafed through those magazines. The young man thought they even had their own ranking table, special reports. He figured it was like they were like stars or something. The hero thought that if he was a hunter, he would want to join this particular guild he saw on the magazine page. He thought that it was weird, this whole thing. It was as if the young man was both in Japan and not. The hero had spent 3 years in another world, so he was a bit used to the strangeness. He closed the magazine and picked up his cell phone. Takeru thought that this box called a cell phone was adorable. It was difficult to handle, but he should definitely learn how to do it. The young man thought that. Besides, if it was used often, it would probably just get a huge bill. On the screen of his phone, he saw his face. He got a notification on his phone. The screen turned on. The young man was startled and almost dropped the phone from his hands. He thought that he was even more nervous now than he was during the battle with the demon lord when he remembered that this thing was spending Takeru's parents' money. He looked at the phone. The lock was facial recognition. He didn't realize what it was. After he opened the phone, he thought it looked like mail. Araki wrote that how did a young man manage to do something as delusional as suicide? He wrote that because of the event, police officers visited his home. The last message said that he had no intention of forgiving the act. Takeru looked carefully and read all the messages. He remembered that he too had once been hurt and humiliated by his classmates. Araki also wrote that once the hero returned to school, let him be sure that he would take care of him so that his time would be even more exciting. He added that he hoped the young man was looking forward to it as much as he was. The young man thought that this was the friend Takeru was playing with. The hero looked at the photo that Araki had sent. Takeru thought that he must have spent a lot of money to send him a bunch of short messages. Araki had texted him to get ready. The young man became uneasy. He yelled that Araki shouldn't have sent him any pictures. Takeru added that he should have thought about the cost of such a message. He was really angry. Mom walked into the room. She was surprised at his reaction. The woman said it was okay because they had Wi-Fi. Takeru asked her again what she was talking about. Mom apologized for not knocking. She continued that she had wanted to tell him that it must have been hard for him to deal with everything because of his memory loss. Mom added that he might not have been in school for a while. The young man was perplexed. Since he was in the same situation as Urashima Taro, he used all his free time to study different things using his smartphone. The hero sat at his desk and studied the information. 30 years ago, after he was summoned to another world, a gate connected this earth and the other world, and monsters started to appear from it. The monsters started killing people. Modern weapons didn't work on these mysterious creatures, but out of nowhere, mages appeared and began to fight these monsters. Many began to share knowledge of their skills, which anyone could learn. Then magic became the most important discipline and people began to defeat the monsters. Takeru was going for a walk. He opened the front door. Mom told him to be careful. Those who studied magic became known as mages, and those who fought monsters were called hunters. Their job became to deal with the gaps between worlds and protect their daily lives. Takeru was walking and typing something into his smartphone at the same time. An elderly man walking nearby told him not to type while he walked. Takeru looked at the man. The man had a crutch in his hands. The young man looked around and followed the people. The man was dropped by a crate of lemonade bottles, and a woman who was having lunch with her daughter was wiping her face. The young man thought that society had quickly adapted to magic, something so foreign that it still felt unreal. This world was very different from the one he knew. It had been 40 years now, so people had adapted. He paused, not that he wanted to go back to his own time, but he felt much more alone than he should have. He heard the voice of a woman screaming and crying. She was screaming that a thief had stolen an item from her. The criminal used a running spell to get out of here as quickly as possible. He laughed at this woman's helplessness. Takeru noticed that this guy used magic to escape. He thought that the thief was faster than the motorcyclist. The thief was pushing people away to get away quickly. He was yelling for everyone to get out of his way. Takeru used a physical enhancement spell. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed the criminal's shoulder. Takeru said that if he was going to steal, he should have been faster. The thief was scared. The woman thanked him for saving them. She asked what they could have done for him. Takeru tried to stop them. He told them not to worry. The character originally just wanted to observe. The girl, who was apparently the woman's daughter, said that his magic was just cool. The woman added that it was the first time she had ever seen a person be so fast under amplification. Takeru closed his eyes. He asked himself what it meant that it was too fast. The hero realized that he needed to be more careful next time. His grandmother motioned to him to hold out her hand. Takeru extended his hand, and Grandma placed some candy in his palm. Grandma said that they wanted to thank him properly, but since he was refusing, he should have at least taken the candy. Takeru was surprised. He looked at his hand. He remembered his grandmother thanking him for massaging her shoulders. She said she was giving him his favorite candy as a thank you. The young man's face changed. The girl asked him what was wrong. Takeru squeezed the candy in his hand and thanked them. He thought that even though 40 years had passed and many things had changed, the basic aspects remained the same, and he was glad for that. They said goodbye to the young man. Takeru thought it was getting quite dark. The hero thought he should have hurried back home. From behind, someone approached him. He was about to hit the hero. Takeru dodged, and the man's punch went right by him. The offender was very surprised by this. The boy turned around. He asked that the young man was glad he dodged thanks to pure chance. The offending man added that he was glad too, if the young man hadn't ignored his message. The offending boy asked if he understood what the message was about. It was Araki. Takeru didn't recognize him at first, but then he remembered the picture he had sent. The enemy was still smirking. Takeru asked that he was Araki. The adversary got angry. He said he should have said Araki-kun. The guy repeated it several times. Takeru thought that didn't change either. The offending boy kept repeating that he should be called Araki-kun. He yelled that the young man shouldn't have just called him by his first name without proper respect. He insulted Takeru. The insulter added that he should have addressed him as Araki-kun. Araki yelled that why that made his eyes pop. He continued that it was the young man's fault that the police had visited his house. Takeru thought that even after 40 years, there were still characters like him getting caught. He concluded that Takeru must have had the same problem. Araki yelled that he had been hit in a sore spot, and it was horrible. Takeru watched it all with an indifferent look. He used to be so afraid of guys like this that he just froze and couldn't respond in any way. Takeru realized that the battles with dragons in the other world were much scarier. If one could compare those battles and meeting Araki, he would look like a dog. Araki had been yelling the entire time, so the young man dared not dare to dangle in the clouds. He confirmed that he was backed up by truly dangerous senpai. The abuser said that even if he had killed the young man, the senpai would have hushed things up. The hero thought that it looked like he had grown up after all. He was glad he had. A slight smile appeared on his face. Araki asked him why he was the one laughing so hard. Araki started kneading his fingers. He said that Takeru was a coward who tried to escape by choosing death. He shouted that Takeru shouldn't have been dangling in the clouds. Araki was about to punch him. The young man thought he was like a small dog. Takeru asked himself what could have been done. He realized that he could easily send this kid flying, but he still didn't want to stand out. He couldn't think of anything better to do than just make him fall. The hero took a step back. Araki continued that letting someone like him be born was a huge mistake. He began to insult Takeru's parents. The young man became angry, and before Araki could do anything about it, Takeru punched him in the face with his fist. Araki flew backwards from the blow. Takeru warned him not to dare to speak ill of his parents. Araki now looked at him with fear. Araki still continued to call him names. He said that the use of battle magic is here, but he didn't have time to finish his thought. A spatial rift appeared behind him. Araki was even more frightened. Takeru was also frightened. He shouted that, "Is it really a rupture in reality?" A monster appeared out of the rupture, and with one blow, it made Araki fly into the nearest wall. Takeru stood still for the time being. Araki was unconscious. Takeru thought that he didn't seem to be dead. He didn't know if it was because he was a boxer, but the kid was tough enough. He looked at the monster. Takeru figured there were no intruders here and Araki was unconscious, but it wasn't like he had tons of time, so he needed to get this over with quickly. He used a physical enhancement spell. In a second, Takeru was right next to the monster. He was going to destroy it with one punch. Takeru punched the monster in the stomach. His hand went through the monster and left a hole in its stomach. The monster fell to the ground with a clatter. Araki started to come to his senses. Takeru looked at the monster's body. Takeru thought that now it was all like footage from a horror movie. He considered that it was just Araki. The hero thought that what was more important was the breakup because it couldn't be left just like that. Takeru realized that since it was very bad, that it was very much like summoning magic from another world. If he broke the magic circle, it had to disappear. The young man used the spell, and the portal disappeared. It worked, he thought. The sounds of cars were heard. Takeru turned around. He thought this was all bad. The young man tried to get out of here faster. Police and hunters had gathered at the site of the portal. The girl said that she couldn't believe that it was possible to kill a blood ogre with one blow. This girl was the same hunter who was standing on the roof of the building. A man approached her and said that it was already like this when they arrived at the place. The blood ogre was already dead and the gap was closed. The girl's eyes rounded. The man continued that this was also where they found the kid unconscious. He was fine, getting away with a couple bruises. He assumed that the boy had fought with a classmate here. The man said that the kid said he was the one who killed the blood ogre. The girl crouched down to examine the place. The girl thought that it didn't look like that at all. She didn't feel he had enough strength in him to defeat the monster with a single blow. She wondered why it was so heavily stained with blood. The girl remembered the young boy who had killed an ogre while saving his parents. She thought then decided that the incident had been misinterpreted by her. She replied to the man that she was going back to the Hunters Association. The girl asked him if he could send her a report. The man agreed. The girl asked herself what really happened. Someone in the watching crowd yelled out that it was Takamine Sakura. A man standing nearby replied that he was right. He added that her face was very cute, and you couldn't tell right away that she was the youngest of the hunters who had risen to C rank. She was going to get out of here. Sakura closed her eyes and removed herself from there. She knew that the blood ogre was a very dangerous monster, and it might take a few orang hunters to eliminate it. This man was faster than her, who was sent by the Hunter Association, someone to defeat the monster and close the gap. The girl was silent. She asked what? Was there really a hunter stronger than her in this city? Meanwhile, Takeru was having dinner with his parents at Kazami High School. The young man looked at the building. He asked himself that it was the school Takeru attended. The hero thought that the school looked much more familiar than it should have been. Earlier, his dad had tried to talk him out of it. He said that Takeru didn't have to go back to school yet if he didn't want to. Dad grabbed him by the shoulders. The young man thought that despite all their entreaties, he felt perfectly fine. The hero realized that Tucker wouldn't have liked the fact that he had to catch up on a whole year of missed schooling. He looked around and saw cheerful students. The hero asked himself what could have been that drove Takeru to suicide. It seemed to the young man that he really didn't have any friends. The circumstances that Takeru had to face and what had happened in his past life were very similar. However, he had been given a second chance in a different world. He had someone to practice magic with, to exchange fierce glances between his adventurer friends, to escape or fight powerful demons. He remembered St. Edelweiss and the time they had spent together. St. Edelweiss wished to create a world where everyone could laugh without pretense. Takeru tried to come to his senses. He told himself it was time to go. He thought he could take his first step here thanks to Edelweiss. He walked into the classroom. The teacher said that Kusanagi was returning to class today. He continued that because of what happened to him, he now had a slight memory loss. The teacher added that he asked everyone to support him and help him if possible. His classmates looked at him with frightened eyes. The young man walked over and sat down in his seat. The teacher said he was leaving them alone because their teacher would be coming soon for their first lesson. The students reluctantly waited for the teacher. Takeru hesitated for a moment. Someone shouted, asking if it was true that he was the one who killed the blood ogre. Someone added that it was just fantastically cool. Araki and his gang walked into the classroom. One of them said that, as expected of Araki-kun. Araki left. He replied that who else could have done it if not the magnificent him. He noticed Takeru sitting at the last desk. Araki's face changed. He remembered everything that happened yesterday. Takeru picked up his cell phone. Araki made his way to his seat and sat down. He put his feet on the table. Takeru thought he should have just ignored him. Someone asked Araki what happened to him. He replied that everything was fine. One of the students turned to Takeru, saying that the teacher was talking about amnesia. He asked if Takeru was okay. The young man interrogated him. He figured there were people here who had been in contact with Takeru after all. The classmate said it was clear, and he didn't even remember him. The classmate introduced himself as Sawamura Tekuro. He went on to say that he liked the hunters too. They often chatted about them. He ended by adding that it was nice to get reacquainted with him. Tekuro held out his hand. Takeru remained silent. The classmate turned to him again. He did not lower his hand. After a brief silence, the young man said it was nice to meet him too. He thought that Takeru had friends after all. It was already past noon. Takeru laid his head on the table from fatigue. He had no energy. Takeru asked him if he was okay. Takeru thought he was definitely stronger physically and spiritually after being in the other world. But that couldn't be said for his intelligence. He wasn't too smart before when he went to high school himself, and he was always failing his studies. Not to mention that his notebooks were made of paper, and now he had a tablet in front of him. Takeru said that was how they studied in the future. The classmate started to get worried. He asked himself that this was what amnesia looked like. The friend said that even so, he didn't look too discouraged, rather the opposite. Takeru replied that there was no need to worry about it. The classmate interrogated him. The young man asked his new friend what kind of person Kusanagi Takeru was to him. The classmate replied that he was the kindest person in the whole world. Takeru quietly replied that he understood. Someone called out to Takeru. It was a guy from Araki's gang. He said that Takeru looked healthy, and he was glad about that. Another added that they were worried about Takeru. They all grinned at them. Behind them stood Araki. Takeru greeted them quietly. Araki's friend asked him what really happened. Another added that he was so scared of the police. Araki looked at them with a menacing look. His friends were startled and replied that they were just joking. Araki said that the last time they messed with him, picking on Kusanagi again, they only got one trouble. A friend chimed in, while another said that the cops were very clingy. Takeru tried to remain calm, repeating to himself to ignore them. Tekuro said, turning to the Araki friends that, really, they wanted him to help them with their lessons again. Takeru looked at him perplexed. The gang laughed. One of them said that they were really counting on Sawamura-chan. The classmate quietly agreed. Tekuro stood up and started packing. One of the abusers asked that he was going to the library again. He added that Tekuro understood everything perfectly. He continued that it was necessary to leave in a hurry. Kusanagi got up from his seat and called out to them. Tekuro said lastly that they would see each other tomorrow. They left. Takeru thought to himself, did he really pull these guys up? He asked himself, they were suddenly serious about their studies. Takeru looked around. He looked at his classmates. He couldn't believe that this could be the case. Takeru approached his classmates, asking where they went. He asked that it wasn't the library, but the roof. The classmates were worried. One of them replied that because of what happened to him, the roof was now closed. The girl replied that they went to the industrial zone behind the school. Takeru thanked them and hurriedly left the classroom. A classmate asked that didn't he always carry himself so confidently. Another added that maybe it was because of the amnesia. The bully said that the greater the mass or acceleration of an object, the more damage it did. He continued that it worked out that the strength of the object was equal to the mass multiplied by the acceleration. He asked what the name of what the resultant force was. The guy immediately replied that it was Araki-kun. Araki replied that he had no idea what it was about. His friend was holding Tekuro, and Araki was punching him. The other friend replied that was the wrong answer. Tekuro fell to the ground. The friend replied that the correct answer was. He started looking for the records, but he never found any. He threatened Tekuro that he would hurt him. The friend replied that he knew the answer, and it was Newton's second law. Araki asked that he was really smart or something. Takeru observed this. He too thought it was Newton's second law. He thought he came here, but what to do next? The hero didn't want to change Takeru's position too drastically, so he thought it was better to avoid direct confrontations. Araki had insulted Takeru. Araki asked if he couldn't call for help from Kusanagi or something. The insulted man asked if he realized that he was trying to get himself killed because of playing games with them. Araki grabbed Takeru by the hair. Takeru, who had been watching all of this, thought that he wasn't wrong after all. Sawamura had come here on his own. It didn't matter what he thought about it, he did it to protect Takeru. And to him, Kusanagi Takeru was Takeru's top priority. He wanted to save him because if he came here, Takeru was calling out to Takeru for help. The offending man shoved Takeru aside. He repeated Takeru's words saying that he had to go home to watch anime. He added that it was disgusting. Takeru remained silent. He replied that he thought completely differently. They got Takeru's attention. Takeru continued that he had abandoned Kusanagi-kun even though he was his friend. The gang taunted him with his own words. They insulted him with all sorts of derogatory words. Takeru fell into a stupor at what he heard. Takeru continued, saying that he would never have asked him to help him, even if it meant he was becoming their next target. He added that even knowing that he would fight all of them instead of himself. Takeru remembered all the times they had been together. Takeru cried out in despair. He screamed that he had just taken advantage of his kindness. Takeru, watching all of this, thought that it couldn't have been himself because he was so worried about something other than himself. Takeru shouted that he wasn't going to make that mistake this time. Takeru started to feel sick. Takeru continued that he was going to save Kusanagi-kun this time. He was interrupted by Araki, who punched him in the face. He said that it was clear to him. The blow made Takeru fall down. Araki said that it was now clear how he perceived their elective. He continued that, as expected, the nerds were completely different. The offending student added that, in any case, they had come to have fun, not to learn. Araki said that he was very angry about Kusanagi. His friend asked that he wasn't scared after what he saw. Araki advised the man not to say any more. Takeru grabbed his heart. Takeru stood up. The young man realized what he wanted. The hero realized that his top priority was Kusanagi Takeru. The young man covered his friend with himself. The abusers looked at him, not realizing what he wanted. The young man turned to Takeru saying that they should have saved Sawamura together. The hero said that now it was his turn to play with them. Takeru wasn't about to back down. One of the abusers asked what he was here for. Another added that he came here to get his portion of beating. He continued that he was sick of the young man. Araki remained silent and looked at him with a threatening look. Takeru didn't even look away. Takeru looked at his savior. He couldn't see who it was without his glasses. Takeru looked at him. Takeru passed out. The abuser noticed this and said he passed out. The other added that he was so skinny he didn't even have the strength to be a punching bag. Takeru crouched down and used a spell. He answered them that Takeru was very strong. The offending men started laughing. One of them asked that he meant it all. Another asked that they had beaten him so badly that it had slipped his mind. He wanted to add something else, but Takeru punched him in the face. The blow sent the offending man flying backwards. Due to the damage to his nose, blood started to flow out of it. Takeru had a nonchalant face. The other two were dumbfounded. When the other realized what happened, he asked what happened. Takeru kicked the other one in the lower jaw. Araki realized that the matter was bad. The young man didn't change his face. Araki's friends came to their senses and stood up. The first one shouted that there was no need to look down on him. He had insulted Takeru and was going to hit him. The second one joined in on this as well. They ran towards Takeru from two opposite sides. When they were close, Takeru took them by their heads and pushed them forehead to forehead. Araki was angry beyond belief. He shouted that Takeru was pissing him off. Araki almost reached him, but Takeru didn't even move. Araki's punch didn't reach its target. Takeru punched him and knocked him to the floor. He grabbed Araki's face. The young man warned that if he wasn't going to correct his manner of constantly barking, he was going to make the people around him uncomfortable. Takeru added that even though he liked dogs, he didn't care. Takeru let go of his face. Araki's friends ran up and called out to him. The friends were getting ready to fight again. They activated their magic circles and were about to attack. One of them said that it was just Kusanagi. The other needed his fingers and added that he shouldn't have gotten cocky. Takeru asked himself that they weren't going to settle down. He figured it was even easier for him that way. Back in the days when he had fought the Demon Lord's army, the young man had believed him and let him go. Because of that, the town was leveled to the ground. Then the demon fell at the young man's feet. He said he was forced to do all this against his will by the Demon Lord. He swore that he was willing to do anything. The demon screamed and called for help. Through it all, the young man learned his lesson. If one had already started to do something, They shouldn't have abandoned it halfway through. The young man was going to make sure that they would never be able to do something like this again. He promised that the abusers would never touch Sawamura again. Takeru headed towards them. The young man was going to break their will. He raised his hand forward, pointing at his opponents. The detractors were horrified. A crack appeared in the sky. One of them said it was a blue rift. Another added that it was bad. A monster came out of the rift. The first one shouted that it had already come out. He asked it was an ogre. Takeru stood there not paying attention to their cries. The first one asked why it was an ogre again. He added that it was the most dangerous monster that could ever come out of the blue rift. The friends ran up to Araki, who had already come to his senses. The second said that they didn't need to worry because Araki-kun was with them. The first added that Araki had put down a blood ogre yesterday. After all, Araki started to worry. The blood ogres were asking Araki for him to destroy the monster. Araki looked at Takeru with fear in his eyes. Araki said that the ogre was just trash to him. He activated the fireball spell and aimed at the monster. The fireball just flew past the ogre. The friends cheered for Araki. Takeru stood motionless. Araki shouted, asking what didn't work. The monster got angry and headed towards Araki. He punched Araki in the face, causing Araki to fly backwards. The friends started to get worried. He yelled and called out for Araki. The other said that all of this was not good, so they should have run away. They ran away. The monster looked after them at first, but then switched to Takeru, who was still standing motionless. Takeru stared at the ogre for a while. He activated the fireball spell. A huge magic circle appeared behind the young man, with fireballs around its edges. The ogre began to attack him. The hero destroyed the ogre with one blow. After that blow, someone's lurching was heard. It was Araki. Takeru looked at him. Araki crawled over to Takeru. He said it was a monster. Araki wanted to say something else, but Takeru stopped him. He said that he didn't need to go near it. The young man headed towards Araki himself. Takeru applied a healing spell. Araki looked at his hands. He asked what it was. Takeru turned to him and touched the floor with his index finger. From that touch, the floor began to crack. Araki was startled. Takeru was still just as nonchalant. Takeru said that he didn't want to stand out and just wanted to exist peacefully, so they had to tell everyone that he was the one who defeated the ogre again. Araki was nervous. He interjected. Takeru didn't even pay attention to it. He continued that everything had to stay the way it was. Araki tried to object, but Takeru interrupted him. He said that there were no witnesses here, so everything was fine. The young man asked him if it was true that he was the one who defeated the blood ogre yesterday. Araki hesitated for a moment. He was trying to say something. Takeru interrupted him again. He added that from now on, Araki was not to go near him or Sawamura. The young man continued that the most important thing was that he shouldn't bully those around him. The young man said that this also applied to his two buddies. They should have been quieted down. He continued that if he ever found out they were up to their old tricks again. Takeru touched Araki's forehead with his index finger. He asked if they understood each other. Araki was horrified. Takeru put him to sleep. He saw in his mind's eye a small dog that had fallen asleep. Someone's voice was heard saying that it was right here. Someone was saying that Nuno should have been faster because the ogre had been spotted there. Takeru picked up his friend. He said that it was time for them to go. The young man added that Araki needed to try and distract them. Someone turned to Araki, asking if he was okay. Araki lay there like that, at the hunter training school that was sponsored by the Hunter Association, Auron Academy. The girl had said that she had been sent to deal with the ogre at Kazami High School, but before she arrived on the scene, he was already finished. Sekura listened and read the report at the same time. Sekura replied that everything was clear. The girl's face turned red. She bowed and apologized. The girl continued that the lone apprentice they found at the battle site said he was the one who defeated the ogre, but she didn't think that was the case. She added that the residual mana at the battle site was of prohibitive power to an ordinary person. The girl became uneasy. She said that the mana was monstrous. Sekura remained silent. Sekura thought that the girl looked so scared, even though she had quite enough strength for a hunter. She looked at the report where she saw the same student who killed the ogre from yesterday. Sekura thanked her for the information. She said she would look into the case and study it further. The girl asked her to look into the case. She asked, in that case, to excuse her. Someone said that Hunter Takamine was so cool and cute. Another staff member added that she was wonderful. They were stopped by a teacher who ordered them not to yell in the hallway. The conversationalists apologized to the teacher. Sekura hugged herself to her knees and put her head on her lap. She was having a very hard time with this type of person. She just wanted to fight monsters. She didn't like what she was doing right now. And what was most important, her appearance had nothing to do with what she was doing. Sekura asked everyone to leave her alone. It was all in the girl's mind. She looked up. Sakura realized that the one who had dealt with the monster today, all things considered, was someone other than Araki. She thought back to the incident with the bloody ogre the other day. According to reports, Araki was arguing with someone there. The girl came to the conclusion that this someone had intentionally disappeared before their appearance. Sakura was sure that she would be able to get closer to the truth if she talked to Araki. She looked at the picture that had her family in it. The girl realized that all of this was also for her family. Sakura walked out of the building and looked at it. She realized that the possibility of an unaccounted for force could not be discounted. Sakura walked into the classroom. Araki sat at his desk and studied. He had completely changed his image. He had a band-aid on his forehead. His friends were laughing at him. One asked what the hell that makeover was all about. The other added that it was unlike him. The offending friends turned around and saw Takuro. Sawamura was startled. Their facial expressions changed. They were about to hit him, but they were hit by Araki. Takuro heard Takuru's voice wishing him a good morning. Sawamura started to get worried. He turned around and wished him good morning as well. Takuro asked him about his wounds. Sawamura started to make excuses that, to tell the truth, he had gotten so bad yesterday. Takuro thought that he wanted to heal everything, but remembered the doctor's words, who said that even strong healers couldn't cure something like that. Sawamura asked as he went straight home yesterday. Takuro nodded. Takuro explained that his mother had made a bunch of tonkatsu, deep-fried pork chops, to celebrate his return to school. The young man added that he thought his stomach was going to burst. Sawamura started laughing. He replied that it must have been very hard. Sawamura asked what had happened to Araki-kun. Takuro tried to dodge by asking if it wasn't all for the best. He added that Araki had become a diligent student. Sakura stood at the gate of the school. Sakura figured this was what Kazami High School was. The students were in class. Yelling was heard on the sports field, which caught Sakura's attention. A student apologized to the teacher for burning his hair. The teacher replied that he practiced magic, so this sometimes happened. The student tried to justify that it suited the teacher's hair so much more. The teacher asked that he was telling the truth. Sakura laughed. Right now all hunters were handled by the Hunters Association. A man with great power and left to himself, who knew what he could do with his power. Even the subordinate hunters, Sakura thought. The girl stopped herself and shook her head. Sakura thought that was another reason why she had to find this unaccountable. She was approached by a stranger who asked what the Valkyrie was forgetting here. It was Orochi Hebikawa-jin, a S-rank hunter. He said hello to Sakura. Sakura asked what he was doing here. Orochi answered with a question to a question. He asked that everything was fine, after all. The girl replied that everything wasn't exactly fine. She said that the Aoraboros Guild was responsible for the Tokai region, the central city of Japan, located in the southeastern part of Hi Prefecture on the Giga Peninsula on the shores of Ise Bay. Sakura continued, asking if it was normal for the head of the guild to be here. Orochi smirked. He replied that Sakura didn't need to worry because they had so many wonderful people on staff. They stood and were silent for a while. Sakura knew that the Aoraboros Guild was known for their aggressive method of finding newcomers. She knew that meant that the reason he was here was the same reason she was, which was to search for the unaccounted for. The girl said that it looked like his guildmates had been hovering around lately, trying to gain even more power. Orochi asked her where she got all this from. He continued that Sakura was still young, but had already gotten her sources of information. Sakura asked that even they were afraid of the gods of death. Orochi replied that he didn't care at all about righteous idiots who couldn't see further than their own noses. He added that she didn't seem interested in stirring up conflict between the guilds. Sakura said that they, the hunters, weren't supposed to care about infighting. She added that they should protect people with their strength. Orochi replied that in order to defend, they needed to put together a strong coalition. The man continued that with a much stronger leader than the Hunters Association had. Sakura said he sounded like he was the chosen one. She added that she couldn't stand that kind of thing. Orochi replied that she was acting like a hunter with a crystal clear heart. Sakura worried, and Orochi stood and smirked. Orochi continued that it was more important that she was here. It meant that the kid was beyond doubt here too. Sakura asked what he was up to. Orochi interjected that what were they up to. Sakura thought that he wanted to make a commotion to lure the young man out. Sakura yelled that he needed to stop it immediately. Orochi replied that she couldn't tell him to do that. Sakura ran up to him to stop him. A rift opened up in the hallway. The students shouted that the rift had opened. The teacher yelled that they needed to stay calm and evacuate according to the plan. Sakura said that they needed to close the rift. Orochi replied that he was going back. Sakura was angry. Orochi said that it looked like it was a blue rift, and since she was here, it should have been okay. He added that it was out of his hands to deal with such petty stuff. Sekura asked him that wasn't he a hunter. Orochi replied that he was the best S-rank hunter in Japan. To be exact, Sekura ran off to school. Orochi thought that the magical power he had felt just for a moment when he opened the rift was much stronger than he thought, as was the ability to erase all traces to blend in with the normal measured flow of life. Orochi asked himself that it looked like they were dealing with a monster. Orochi said that now he should have prepared a bunch of stuff. He scratched the back of his head. There were a lot of monsters, mostly burning skeletons. They were attacking the students. Sekura rushed over and saved one student. Sekura destroyed one monster after another. The girl said there were a lot more than she thought. One of the students was attacked by a monster. She was screaming not to be left here. Sekura was very fast. She destroyed that monster in a second as well. After she destroyed those monsters, she stood up and looked around. The students were behind her. Sekura turned around. She said that she was the S-ranked hunter, Takamine Sekura. Sekura continued that she would take care of the monsters and the students needed to hurry up and evacuate everyone. One of the guys grabbed this student. All the students rushed towards the exit. Araki's friends shouted that even though he looked strange, he was as strong as ever. Sekura figured someone with experience in battles was here. These skeletons and ghouls were lower-ranked monsters, so students should be fine. Sekura knew she could help them. The wandering lights used magic to warn of danger, but there weren't many of them here. She figured if they were quiet, they could handle themselves. Sekura ran towards the stairs. She realized that the mana was coming from the floor above. But then again, this was an unfamiliar situation for them. They hadn't received proper instruction, much less training, so they couldn't be blamed for giving into panic and not being able to move now. That was why hunters existed in the first place. Sekura applied the sacred circle spell. Upon reaching the roof, Sekura saw a young man who was in the middle of the magic circle. She yelled out that she had found him. Sekura looked at the student's back. She added that she had found the unaccounted for one. Takeru cast the sacred circle spell and touched the circle. He had dealt with the monsters. Takeru thought that now the rift had to be dealt with. A voice was heard that said she had found it. Standing in the doorway was Sekura. Takeru used a physical enhancement spell and wanted to run away. Sekura shouted that it was impossible for him to escape. She ran after him at the speed of light. Sekura thought he was too fast. The girl asked herself if it was really just a physical boost. She thought that lightning speed should have given her more speed than his spell. Takeru asked himself that she was keeping up with him. He didn't want to turn around and show the girl his face, but he could feel her pressure. The young man thought he could have been faster if he wanted to. He realized that physical enhancement was magic that enhanced the physical abilities of whoever used it, and that would already be beyond Kusanagi Takeru's powers. The hero realized that whether it was his real body that had gone through a bunch of training, either way, there was no point in thinking about it now. He thought that magic came from a person's soul, not body, so he still had all of his powers left, but one couldn't let his guard down. The young man apologized to Takeru for the fact that his body would have to be pumped up. He promised to make sure it wouldn't become a bodybuilder's body. The hero used the air enhancement spell. He jumped from the roof. A vortex appeared around him. Sekura asked what it was. The vortex spread out, sweeping away everything in its path. Sekura thought she would have to let him go this time. She wondered. The young man thought he was already far enough away from the school, but his backpack was still there. He made the decision that he would pick it up tomorrow. The hero was sure that today's classes were already over. Takeru realized that the one who was following him was most likely a hunter. When he looked up information about them online, he thought they were like a knightly order or a guild of adventurers from another world. But there were some pretty strong people there. Takeru thought that he couldn't let his guard down. He walked into the house and shouted that he was back. His mom ran up to him and hugged him. She said she was so glad he really was okay. The young man apologized for making her worry. His mom said she saw that the school had been attacked by ogres, and he hadn't answered his phone. Takeru apologized and afterwards asked himself where his phone had gone. Mom said that his friend had stopped by and brought his phone. Mom added that the friend was in the living room, and he should have thanked his friend. Takeru headed to the living room. He thanked Soumura. Sekura was sitting in the living room drinking tea. Takeru's face changed. Sekura turned to him saying welcome back. Takeru remembered her. Takeru asked that she was Takamine Sekura, the S-rank hunter. The girl stood up and answered positively. Sekura thanked him for what he had done earlier. Takeru thought she was the one chasing him. He picked up the phone. The young man thanked the girl for making a detour to return his phone to him. Sekura stopped him. She said she wanted to ask him about something. Takeru smiled. He asked what questions she had for him. Sekura smiled as well. She continued that it was about yesterday's incident at the abandoned factory. The girl added that she also wanted to ask about the bloody ogre case from a while ago. Takeru realized that the case was bad. Takeru realized that it was much worse than he thought. He couldn't run away anymore, and they couldn't discuss things openly here. The young man noticed that Takeru's mom was here too, and she might have misunderstood, so no matter where you looked, things were really bad. Takeru asked if they could have a chat. He continued that since she had already made such a deed to stop by, he wanted to thank her properly. He suggested that they continue in his room. Sakura hesitated for a moment, then agreed afterward. Her mom asked that maybe she should have gone out and bought a cake. Takeru asked her to ignore them. Takeru placed the tea tray on the table in the room. Sakura walked over there as well. The young man pulled back a chair and motioned for Sakura to sit down. Sakura replied that she was fine here as is. Takeru sat down on the chair. He became serious. Sakura got straight to the point. She asked him who he was. Takeru figured the girl didn't beat around the bush. The young man started to speak. Sakura stopped him. She said that depending on what she hears, she might have to use force. A lightning bolt appeared in her hand. Takeru thought she was being rather rude. He assumed that if he lied, she would guess. He pondered that if he said he was a hero from another world, she would write it off as a joke. The young man asked himself what to do. Sakura approached him. She asked why he was quiet now. The girl also asked that, meaning that there was something he didn't want to talk about. Takeru introduced the boy. He replied that he hadn't done anything wrong, and actually had amnesia. The young man continued that if she had asked his parents, they would have confirmed it, and the school had been notified as well. Sakura fell silent. Sakura asked that in that case, how he fought monsters. She continued that even if he had a good instinct for using magic, how did he stay calm in such a commotion? Takeru replied that he didn't know it himself, but he was just good at it and that was it. Sakura looked at him with a menacing look. Takeru asked himself a little too much. Sakura lifted her leg and placed her knee on the chair, between his legs. She asked why he was hiding his powers. Takeru replied that even if he suddenly possessed such powers, it didn't mean he wanted to use them because they scared him. Sakura said that he could perform the hunter's tasks at the highest level. The young man explained that he didn't want to make his parents worry. He had no desire to become a hunter. Sakura asked that even if that meant he had everything he desired, such as status in society, fame, notoriety. Takeru remained silent. The young man replied that he didn't need all of that. He continued that if he could live in peace and tranquility, he would prefer that. Sakura's face changed. The girl fell silent. She pulled away and said that she understood him. Sakura continued that as long as he didn't use his powers to do bad things, neither she nor the Hunters Association would have a claim on him. She added that she would do her best to make everyone think that she was the only one who had dealt with everything at school. Takeru asked her what she believed. Sakura replied that she wasn't going to take everything at face value right away. She looked away. Sakura continued that when she thought about what he had done, she realized that he was protecting others. Takeru remained silent. Sakura apologized for stalking him out of the blue. Also, she had behaved inappropriately at his house. Takeru countered that he was the one who needed to apologize for acting so suspicious. The girl said that if she could give advice, it wasn't the best idea to set a password of 4 zeros on her smartphone. Takeru realized how she had managed to find it. Sakura was silent. Takeru asked what else she had to say. Sakura replied that she became a hunter so that others could live in peace. She continued that he wouldn't be able to hide his powers forever, but anyway, if he wanted to live a peaceful life. The girl fell silent. She added that then his ordinary everyday life was going to be protected by her. Sakura walked away. Takeru stared after her. He thought that there were people like Edelweiss here too. Sakura had saved his phone number just to be safe. The girl thought he was having a really hard time dealing with all of this because of his amnesia. She remembered him asking if she knew where the infrared sensor was. Then she asked that he was going to set a trap. Sakura looked at her phone. She thought he was a very mysterious person. The girl smiled. An elderly man walked by nearby. He told Sakura that she shouldn't have texted on the go. There was a picture of hunters hanging on a banner. Someone in the crowd shouted that it was a group of C-rank Wind Guard hunters. The guy went on to say that they had helped him once and turned out to be nice people. His friend interrogated him. The guy replied that they said they would protect their neighborhood. He continued that they made it feel like they had local heroes. He added that Amamiya Matsuri-chan was also very nice. His friend interjected him. He said that Chika-chan was much cuter. They argued amongst themselves. Takeru ran by them. The school was closed for a while because of that incident. Takeru thought that running always calmed him down so much. He remembered that in the other world, it was part of his daily schedule. The hero thought, Not that he was good at shirking it because of the general who trained him in blade wielding and was always nearby. It was hard for him at first, but it helped him get his body in shape very quickly. He realized that it was the perfect solution for a recluse like him. A spatial rift began to appear. Takeru realized that it was a black rift. He knew that it took some time for the black rift to open and monsters to appear from there. It was still possible to close the rift before this world was damaged by defeating the leader of the monsters of this rift. The hero turned his attention to the people who stood waiting for the hunters. He knew there was another world inside this rift. The young man asked himself that there could have been a world there that he had already been to. He continued to ask himself that if he entered it now, could he have gotten a handle on what was going on? Takeru thought. Someone grabbed his shoulder and told him that he needed to chase his fears away. The guy continued that the Wind Guardians were here. He added that he had nothing to worry about. Shirai Chika blushed. The girl apologized for his behavior. The other guy asked him to calm down. It was Tomita Yuichi. Amamiya Matsuri said that was one of his strengths. Yuichi agreed with her, but added that he was insane. Gato Mamoru replied that he didn't care about that. Takeru looked at the banner. It was them, he thought. People noticed the hunters. They shouted that they were counting on them. The young man thought they were so lively. They definitely left behind the feeling of local heroes. Gato called out to him. Gato shouted that they would destroy the rift and everything would be fine. He added that with this shield, he would be able to protect his friends, this town, and himself. Takeru smiled. He replied that they had to try harder. Gato shouted that he was right. Chika said he stunned the young man with his screams. Yuichi pushed the heads and said they should have gone. Amamiya said goodbye. Takeru thought the hype was bringing back memories, just like the general, one of the anti-demon citadels at the front lines of Kanon. Takeru was fighting with the general of Grotto's royal guard. The general asked what was wrong. He added that his movements were getting slower and slower. The young man fought, but never managed to hit him. After another hit, the general said he opened up on top. Takeru thought his neck had opened up. He brought his sword up to his neck. The young man managed to dodge it. The young man fell down. The general brought his sword up to his neck. The general said that he had won. Takeru stood up. The general continued that as expected of the Messiah, he was chosen by the gods for a reason. The general shouted that his physical and magical abilities grew at an impressive rate every day. The young man covered his ears with his hands. Takeru asked that if that was the case, then why couldn't he even hit him? The general replied that it didn't matter how fast he was. He continued that a strong attack always left a gap in his defense. The man added that it was all just a matter of him taking advantage of that gap. Takeru lowered his head and wanted to say something, but the general wouldn't let him. He said that, in other words, if he created such a gap for himself, a monster appeared. They put their swords forward to attack. The general asked what the demon was. He said he had never seen such a thing before. The general asked how it got in here and where the guards were looking. There were more demons. The general destroyed one. He activated his power. Takeru called out to the general. At that time, the general attacked another monster. The young man asked himself what he should do. He realized that he was so scared that he couldn't even move a finger. The general shouted that he would keep this demon occupied for a while, so he had to run. The general continued that as a general appointed by the king to fight in this war, he wouldn't give up so easily. Takeru tried to object, but the general continued. The general addressed him as Takeru. He said that it had only been 3 months since he had appeared in their world. There was a trickle of blood on the corner of his mouth. The general continued that it was like he had gained a grandchild. Every day with him was fun. He said that he had already lost his wife and son, and couldn't bear to lose his grandson as well. The general added that he had to hurry. Takeru was terrified. Takeru wanted to really run away, but he just couldn't use the general as bait and escape. He asked himself that hadn't he decided to forget how he used to be. The young man threw himself into the fight. The general yelled that it was bad because the swing was too big. Takeru thought that if he created a gap for himself, he would realize where he was going to hit. Takeru destroyed the demon. The demon disappeared. The general asked him why he did it. The young man remained silent. Takeru replied that he too would be sad if he lost his grandfather. The general cried. Takeru asked that he had done everything the way he had taught him, hadn't he? The general shouted that the execution was perfect. He continued that it was a perfect performance and he was giving him 500 million points. He tried to hug the young man. Takeru stopped him, telling him that he shouldn't have moved. The young man thought that Gato and the general were very similar. 3 hours had already passed and his hearing still hadn't fully returned. Takeru was warming up. Takeru thought, as far as strength training was concerned, he should have started small, at least 5 minutes a day, and changed the part where he spent days on end. They realized that it was better to focus on cardio and increasing his endurance. Also, stretching couldn't be forgotten. The young man thought, as far as diet was concerned, Takeru didn't have much trouble losing weight, so he didn't need to change anything. His mom cooked a lot for him. Takeru thought that definitely this body felt very different from his own, so he needed to make sure that he wouldn't change it very much. He realized that it was little things like this that everything was built from. Someone was asking to be allowed to come back. Takeru thought he was back to where he had already passed before. The black rift was still open. Gato was screaming that Chika was still inside. He was crying. His friends were trying to heal him. Yuichi shouted that he needed to calm down because among all of them, Chika was the fastest and she would be okay. He added that he understood what Gato was like, but he needed to wait for backup. Amamiya asked why he thought Chika had decided that she would distract them for the sake of the team. Gato cried and cursed. The crowd began to whisper. Gato tried to stand up. He apologized to Chika for having to be bait and for them being so weak. Takeru closed his eyes. Takeru thought as if he was facing another option for his future there. Takeru thought, what if no one showed up anytime soon? He didn't want to admit it. The young man walked into the gap. There was a forest here. Takeru called out to Chika. He came to his senses. The young man asked himself that he had unconsciously walked into the rift. Someone was asking for help. The young man realized that he had to take action to avoid being exposed. He remembered Edelweiss's words. She had said that he was a bit of an unintelligent kid, but that was what was appealing about him. Beyond the rift was Chiku's name. Takeru put on his hood. He was going to save the huntress. He said that once he was inside, there was no turning back. Takeru ran. The demoness sat on the ogre's shoulder. She asked someone else entered here. She smiled. The demoness asked the ogre that he didn't break them right away, at least this time. Takeru was in the rift. He was looking for Chika. He couldn't say for sure if this was the same other world, but for some reason he felt nostalgic. The young man thought that all the monsters were quite familiar. He jumped over the hole. Takeru looked at the marks left behind during the fight. He remembered Gato's shield whose remains were here. The young man continued to run. Chika ran with all her might. She was being chased by a one-eyed cyclops of enormous size. Chika wondered to herself if Yuichi had succeeded. She wondered if Matsuri had cried. The girl remembered how Gato had protected her, but shattered his shield. Gato was seriously injured. She ran away but suddenly fell down. The cyclops almost reached her. The girl was ready to die. Takeru appeared. He used a freezing spell and saved the girl. Chika opened her eyes. She saw the young man in front of her and was surprised. Takeru said that he was glad that he was able to save her in time. He had destroyed the monster in one blow. The young man sat down. He said that Chika managed to get a couple bruises, but overall didn't seem to be badly hurt. Chika stood up. She thanked him for saving her. The girl wanted to know who he was. Takeru beat her to it, saying he was just passing by. Chika asked again. Chika answered in the negative. She asked that he was the kid they met at the entrance to the rift. They remained silent. Chika added that the clothes were the same as the voice. Takeru replied that she had a good memory. Chika replied that she was in charge of finding newcomers on the team, so she noticed everything that was going on around her. The young man remained silent. The girl apologized. Takeru replied that he appreciated her concern. He asked that Cyclops was the boss of the rift. Chika answered in the affirmative. Takeru said that in that case, they should have gotten out of here sooner because her friends were worried about her. Chika smiled. She replied that everything was fine after all. Someone was humming a tune. It was that demoness. She had cast a spell. The demoness said it was about time. Takeru was in the front. They silently searched for a way out. Chika knew that the freeze he used in the beginning was entry-level magic. She asked herself that he had so much power even without ability-enhancing artifacts like her knife. The girl looked at his back. She thought to herself, plus she shouldn't have forgotten that he was dressed like he was out shopping for groceries. Chika asked herself that he had walked into the rift without any hesitation, and why all of a sudden did he need to do that? She didn't notice that she bumped into him. Chika asked what had happened. Takeru said he would borrow her sword. He pulled her sword from its sheath. Takeru pointed the sword at the magic circle. He had time to create a defense spell. A dark energy appeared and started to curl around the magic arrow. The dark power disappeared. Chika didn't expect this. The demoness was also confused. The young man shouted that he had missed. Chika screamed, asking what she had just seen. The girl continued to scream. Takeru said he had to leave. He hugged the girl and started to run away. Chika blushed. She asked what he was doing. Chika screamed that it was too much. The demoness said that it took her by surprise. It also destroyed her pet. Another monster started to emerge from the ground. The demoness laughed. Takeru apologized to Chika for breaking her knife. He continued that he would definitely make amends, and he hoped that his insurance could cover everything. Chika screamed that everything was fine, and she didn't care about that. A dark energy appeared in the air. Takeru asked if the girl had some sort of item to stealthily escape the rift. He added that it would be cool if she had one. Chika yelled that she had a smoke screen behind him. They reached the rift. Takeru let the girl go. He asked her to go first. The young man added that he wanted to ask her for a favor. Chika turned around. Takeru asked that she not tell anyone about him. Chika nodded and said she understood. The demoness activated a new spell. She said something, but when she opened her eyes, she was surprised. Her opponents were standing at the rift. The demoness started yelling that they didn't need to leave. She yelled that they needed to play with Sukuna. Her screams were heard. The demoness decided that she would go after them. She couldn't. Demoness screamed they were just getting to the fun part. She tried to reassure herself that there was nothing more that could be done. Demoness said that next time, they would play along in addition. Chika's friends hugged her and cried. They were happy that she was still in one piece. Takeru was watching all of this. People turned around to look at the hunters. Araki introduced himself. He was clearly displeased. After him, both Sawamura and Kusanagi began to introduce themselves. They were uncomfortable. Someone said that it had been decided that 3 students from Kazami High School, which had been damaged due to an open rift, would be joining them. Not only were they citizens, but they were also friends who had to study with them. That was what they had to protect as hunters. The teacher added that they would stay with them until the school was repaired. The teacher continued that he hoped they would make friends with the students of the Auron Academy. The new students were uncomfortable. Takeru asked himself what kind of situation this was. Sawamura said that when the rift appeared, every school that trained hunters decided to set aside some space for them so as not to interrupt their training. Sawamura continued that the building was intentionally built bigger so that it worked as a shelter among other things. Takeru replied that it made sense to him. Sawamura said that this was the first time for him, so he was excited. He added that he couldn't even imagine that they would have been sent to the Auron Academy. Sawamura was overjoyed. He continued that he had slightly mixed feelings about Araki being here too. Takeru tried to reassure him by saying that he definitely wouldn't have done anything wrong here. He said that he should have forgotten about Araki and just enjoyed life. Sawamura agreed. Sawamura said that, as expected, the Auron Academy was marvelous in every way. He continued that especially because of the famous huntress Takamine Sakura. Sawamura added that there were other students who were at the top of the rankings. He continued that the most important thing was that the academy selected the elite of the country, so the average level of the students was high. Sawamura said that they allocated office space for small or medium-sized guilds that didn't have bases in the main districts or facilities that met the requirements. Kusanagi looked around. Takeru looked at the students of the academy and their lifestyle. Takeru noticed that almost all of the students walked around with weapons. He asked himself that it was to make sure they were always ready for battle. Sawamura said that he heard when the rift appeared, the huntress Takamine was nearby and took care of it. He continued that the students who were released said she was as beautiful as she was strong in battle. Takeru's face changed. Sawamura asked that he had met her. Takeru asked what made him think so. Sawamura explained that the huntress had picked up his smartphone and was asking for his address to return it. Takeru responded in the affirmative. He said that the huntress dropped it off at his house. The young man added that she was a wonderful person. Sawamura replied that he was very jealous of him. Sawamura asked, fixing his glasses, that it could have been that they had exchanged contacts. Takeru laughed. He replied that there was no way that would have happened. Sawamura said she'd just stopped by to return the phone. Takeru realized that if he found out, things would be bad. Sawamura went on to say that he had heard that the huntress Takamine had quite the reckless fan club, so he had to be careful. Takeru interjected. Sawamura said who knew what they could do if they found out she had brought his phone. Sakura showed up in the hallway. All the students turned around and admired her beauty. Sawamura was delighted. He said that even on the school grounds she looked like an unattainable flower. Takeru asked himself that didn't she have any friends. They exchanged glances with Sakura. The girl smiled at him. Kusanagi smiled as well. Sawamura touched his shoulder and called out to him. Takeru went to go. Sawamura ran after him. He yelled that if he didn't go to the cafeteria now, he would be late for class. Sawamura yelled that he didn't need to dodge the subject. The boy smiled. Chika was asked who saved her. She tried to justify that she was in a completely desperate situation, but someone helped her. The girl continued that her eyes were covered in fog from all the running around, so she didn't get a good look at his face or appearance. Chika added that she was really grateful to this man. He He was her savior. Sakura closed her eyes after watching that report. Takeru looked at her with an incomprehensible look. Sakura put her elbows on the table. She said that there were limits to how long she could cover for him. Takeru apologized. Sakura continued that the entire Hunters Association was standing on their ears. Takeru asked that it was bad. Sakura shouted that it was. The girl said that they could assume about the strength of the boss in the Black Rift based on his mana index. She went on to say that this rift was D rank, and the C rank team of Wind Guardians should have been able to manage it in about 10 minutes. Sakura added that it just so happened that an A rank Cyclops appeared there. Sakura explained that among other things, the problem was this unaccounted for force that had suddenly appeared. She continued that someone in no way connected to the Hunters Association just happened to be there, and no one knew if this unknown person was a friend or an enemy. Takeru's face changed. The girl added that more so if there was an enemy there who released such strong magical energy as he described. She fell silent. Takeru wanted to say something. Takeru asked that it would set everyone's ears on edge. After all, Sakura raised her head. She remained silent. The girl later replied that it wasn't like that and she was the one who was too rude. Sakura said that what he did was beyond a doubt the right choice. Sakura stood up. She continued that it didn't matter what special powers he had, he was still a simple citizen who wished for a peaceful life for himself, and she had to protect her. The girl added that she had promised to protect his life. Sakura asked him that he should leave all these dangerous ventures to them, the hunters. She said that after all he had parents who were very worried about him. The girl smiled. She looked at the picture of her family. Takeru was on his way home. He thought that Takamine-chan was a good person. The young man realized that it was quite obvious that she would have a fan club. He stopped. Monsters appeared in front of him. Takeru thought he was starting to get used to these unexpected occurrences. He realized that he shouldn't have done something about it because they were just discussing it. Behind him, the hunters appeared. The hunters very quickly dealt with the bulk of the monsters, but one was intact. That monster was about to attack Takeru. The monster didn't have time to run to Takeru before a hunter's spear pierced into its stomach. It left a hole in the monster's stomach. The hunter who saved Takeru's life said it was dangerous. Takeru stood motionless. The hunter apologized if he scared him. He asked Takeru if he was in one piece. Takeru replied that he hadn't even gotten his uniform dirty. He thanked his savior. The young man thought that this hunter was a local star. The savior interrogated him. He said he had seen it now. Takeru looked at him with a questioning look. The guy added that it was very funny. This hunter's team had their arms outstretched to show off the splendor of their ringleader. The savior held out his hand. He greeted Kusanagi Takeru, a second-year student of Kazami High School. The savior asked what he might have been thinking, why he had given the young man's full name. He hastened to explain that it was proof of his affection for the young man, his future comrade. Takeru interjected him. A hunter from his squad said it was Byadoin Samakun, the rightful heir to the Byadoin style of spearman. Another hunter added that he was a young talent who was also an orang hunter. The hunter wanted to say something else. They clapped for their leader. Hunter added that their leader was the president of the Auran community fan club dedicated to Takamine Sakura. Savior said that they would definitely see each other in the future. He winked at Kusanagi. Our chapter began as Yamato Takeru stared at the guys who stood in strange poses as if they were advertising something. One of the guys who were posing suddenly shouted loudly that he was willing to bet that Yamato Takeru had never heard of the Auran community. Yamato didn't answer anything. Then the guy started to say even louder that this community was created to admire Takamine Sakura. In a crazier voice he said that she is as beautiful as a goddess and those who honor her will unite and protect the city. Then he added that this is the biggest guild in this school that protects the peace of the civilians. Yamato Takeru inwardly wondered if this wasn't a normal fan club. The strange guy explained that the only requirement to join was to love and respect Takamine Sakura, and even if he wasn't a hunter, but just a mage or support, there was room for everyone. As he continued to move his body strangely, the guy jumped up to Yamato and said that he had seen his passionate gaze on Takamine Sakura during lunch break, so it was obvious that he loved her too, which meant that Yamato Takeru would be a great fit in their Auran community. Yamato himself thought about how he's really bad at getting along with this type of person. The crazy guy bounced away from Yamato again and put his hand out in his direction and said that this calmness during a monster attack was not normal behavior. Yamato Takeru replied that he was just so surprised that he couldn't move. The crazy guy continued to move strangely and raised his foot above his head and started to say that he wanted something from Yamato Takeru. But at that moment Takamine Sakura came running out of the corner of the street shouting, asking if there was a rift. As she ran closer to Yamato Takeru, she realized that someone had already taken care of it and she was happy about it. The guy wanted to tell her that it was the same guys from the community that did it. However, when Yamato Takeru turned around to the direction where the guys were, it turned out that they had disappeared. The next day, Yamato Takeru was tormented by thoughts of those guys from the Ouran community. He wondered what they wanted from him yesterday, but hoped he would never contact them again. As he approached the door, he still reasoned that such a huge guild within the school was surprising. But as expected, Takamine Sakura's influence here was impressive. Yamato decided to be careful not to interfere in their affairs. He pulled the door handle to open it, and suddenly the face of the same crazy guy who had said hello to Yamato Takeru appeared in the resulting gap. Yamato Takeru said hello to Bedoin and said that it was dangerous enough to do that, so he should stop. He replied that he was right and changed the subject, saying that being proactive was his motto in life. Yamato Takeru then asked Bedoin why he was here. The crazy guy replied that it was a strange question since they were in the same class. Yamato suddenly remembered how this guy always sat next to Takamine Sakura. Looking into the classroom, the other students waved at them. Yamato was incredibly angry inside himself, wanting to fall under the ground altogether. Suddenly Bedoin put his hand on his shoulder and said that he hoped to get along with him as a classmate. The day went on as usual, but one thing bothered Yamato Takeru. Absolutely every class, Bedoin stared at him and followed him everywhere. At lunch, Yamato Takeru sat down with his friend Sawamura, and Bedoin sat on the next row and kept looking at the guy. At this point, Yamato was getting angry. He decided to ask his friend if he knew anything about Bedoin. Sawamura told the guy that he was the heir to the Bedoin family, a famous clan of swordsmen with thousands of years of history. He was so strong that he was considered a prodigy from a young age. Yamato Takeru said that was very impressive. Then Sawamura added that Bedoin was a highly ranked hunter of their age, just like the hunter Takamine Sakura. Yamato thought to himself that indeed, his spear skills yesterday were not bad. His acquaintance went on to say that that guy was a bit strange. However, after the next lesson, maybe he would realize how good Bedoin was. The next lesson came. The class went to the training ground of the grounds of the Ouran Academy. The strict teacher shouted to the students that it was time for the most important lesson for them as hunters and asked if they were ready. All the students replied that they were ready for the lesson as if they had been waiting for it their whole lives. Yamato Takeru noticed this and said that they were getting too excited for a normal lesson. Sawamura replied that it wasn't just that, it was also training to become hunters. Sawamura explained that this is usually not possible in normal schools with a few exceptions. When someone from the association comes in, as expected it would be in the routine like normal lessons. Yamato Takeru asked him what hunter training was. Sawamura remembered that the guy was seeing it for the first time since returning and didn't know anything about it. Sawamura explained that in general terms, they use such sea machines to train by fighting against monsters in real battles, and pointed his finger in the direction. Yamato Takeru saw a small tracked house. It looked like a tank, for it had a muzzle with round slugs coming out of it. Sawamura explained that those slugs were doppelgangers. They take the form of whatever you load into the C mechanism. Sawamura explained that C is the abbreviation for La mechanism of the doppelgangers' slugs. The guys watched as the slugs turned into an eared monster. Yamato said that he was pretty sure that slugs couldn't do that under normal circumstances. Sawamura only said that it was very cool. Then Yamato Takeru asked him if it would be okay. The comrade told him that it was a decoy monster created by a magician for training, so there was no danger. Yamato Takeru thought about the fact that mages can also develop such magical tools. The lesson started. The teacher was teaching the kids by example. One of the students was fighting a monster. The man yelled at him that you should kick his legs if you can't reach his neck. Then he went to the other students and explained to them that if you act in a group, you should always remember to leave someone to watch the perimeter. Yamato Takeru was amazed that they do this every day, just like firemen. Suddenly the guy heard Araki-kun behind his back grudgingly say that he would be out of any danger anyway. Then Yamato Takeru turned around and asked him what he said. However, Araki-kun started to deny it. Supposedly he didn't say anything. Suddenly the attention of all the students turned to Bedoin. Before the battle with the four monsters, they shouted to everyone to look at his excellent skills. The crazy guy had cut the monsters into pieces in an instant, all thanks to Bedoin's ultimatum technique. Sawamura looked at him with admiration, and when the battle was over said that it was awesome. As expected, Yamato Takeru noticed that Bedoin likes to show off. Suddenly the teacher notified the boys that Yamato Takeru, Sawamura, and Araki were next to go into battle. From far away, 3 sea goblins were running at the guys, looking very weak and frail. The teacher explained to them that they would be their opponents. The rest of the students shouted to the boys that they would try to help them if needed. The teacher pointed to the weapons warehouse and explained that here they could choose their weapons for hunter or mage, and he would advise newcomers to take a sword. Yamato Takeru took the sword, which surprised Sawamura. Yamato explained to him that he wasn't very confident in his magical abilities and asked if he would be a mage. Sawamura replied that he was too weak physically, so without magic he would be useless. The teacher explained to the boys that the weak point of these goblins is the neck, plus they are easily wounded even if you are not hunters, so they should be able to handle it. The teacher shouted to them to get ready because the goblins were already approaching. Yamato Takeru thought about the fact that he could cut them down with his own strength without using skills. The rest of the guys activated the magic ball. Sawamura and Araki used magic to destroy the 2 sea goblins that were standing on the sides. Everyone was surprised that the monster in the middle was standing motionless. Yamato Takeru couldn't understand why the goblin was standing in front of him since he had slashed it. He wondered aloud what happened. The teacher thought he was scared and reassured him that monsters only pretend to attack, so it's okay. Yamato replied that he definitely chopped him up, and at that moment the goblin's head flew to the ground. Everyone was shocked from the fact that the monster's head fell off at a flat spot. Everyone didn't understand when Yamato Takeru did that, as it didn't appear that he swung his sword. Some assumed that the Shi mechanism had malfunctioned. Sawamura looked worriedly at Yamato Takeru. However, the latter said with a sneer that Slug was stupid. How did he not realize he was chopped up? Araki-kun said with the same mockery that the mechanism was probably broken. Sawamura was confused. After all, Yamato Takeru and Araki-kun had never communicated so well. The chapter starts off with Yamato Takeru sitting in the library and thinking about how even the library of this academy has nothing useful to offer. Resting his head on his hand, the guy thought about how it was going to be hard to find a way to get Takeru's body back. The guy looked at the journal he took from Sawamura and decided that maybe this person on it could give him a solution. The magazine was called Japan's Strongest Hunter Who Fights by Absorbing Heroic Spirits. The latter was confused. Yamato Takeru in a rough voice quietly told Bedoin that he should now dodge properly. The crazy guy's eyes filled with fear. Yamato Takeru swung and blew the mad guy's head off. Bedoin suddenly grabbed his head and exhaled in relief, for losing his head was only a vision of his death. However, all of these thoughts greatly unfocused the guy's concentration, which Yamato took advantage of and swung. Bedoin was able to block the blow, but his stance was unsure. Yamato Takeru pushed the guy aside and he fell to the ground with a clatter. Yamato stepped closer to him and put his sword to his neck. Putting the sword to the crazy guy's neck, Yamato quietly mouthed that he had won. Bedoin's eyes went blank in a moment. While all this was happening, a small organism that looked like strings crawled into the huge bull's mouth. At that moment, Bedoin got to his feet, and breathing heavily told Yamato Takeru that he was awesome. He suddenly, like a real psycho, started yelling that Yamato had surpassed him. However, he needed more. He wanted to see even more of the power that Yamato was hiding. The guy replied to him that he had already kept his end of the bargain. The crazy guy, stunned with rage, kept saying that he needed more. Suddenly, this madhouse was interrupted by the appearance of a huge bull behind Bedoin. Yamato Takeru and Bedoin were confused. At that moment, right before their eyes, the huge bull mutated into a minotaur that was already ready to attack them. The minotaur grabbed a concrete column. He was so strong that he broke off a piece of it and threw it right at the guys. They had time to react and bounced away. Bedoin shouted in rage that this was nonsense, and it was impossible, because they could not mutate into other species. Yamato Takeru was also amazed, because he had never seen anything like this before, even in another world. However, he had to fight such a monster once. Bedoin shouted to Yamato Takeru that he should run away, but in the meantime, he would hold this monster back. Yamato was surprised by those words. Yamato Takeru wanted to object to Bedoin. However, the latter shouted the words about the Auran community loudly. Bedoin started shouting that the Auran community is the people who admire Sakura-sama, and at the same time they all share the aspirations of their goddess, and that is to protect the peaceful life of the city and the population from monsters. Bedoin, fighting the monster, kept talking about how he perfectly understands that Yamato Takeru is able to defeat this monster with one pinky finger, but he's just an ordinary person after all. Bedoin decisively shouted that as the head of the Auran community, he would be the embodiment of its ideals and fulfill his duty by protecting Yamato Takeru. After saying that, he delivered a decisive blow to the Minotaur and it fell apart into many pieces. When the fight with the Minotaur was over, Bedoin apologized to Yamato Takeru in a tired voice for bringing him here, knowing that he wanted to hide all his powers, but he just liked him madly. Yamato Takeru liked Bedoin as much as Sakura herself. The crazy guy dreamed of being as strong as them. The action of our chapter begins at the Bedoin family dojo. After a battle with the clan, the winner was Bedoin, who was a freshman in high school at the time, and he mocked his opponent, saying that it didn't look like he was a hunter at all. The men said that Bedoin was gifted with such power from birth, because among all the adults of the clan, only the head of the clan could defeat this young man. Bedoin was incredibly proud of himself, and constantly showed that he was taller than the rest. Bedoin's father was a middle-aged man with long blonde hair. He always told his son not to be rude to his opponents, but Bedoin was a characterful child. His father always told him that skills alone would not get you far, for true strength lies in other things. Young Bedoin answered him in a disgruntled voice that he knew very well that he was the one who protects and leads people the right way with unbreakable intentions in his heart no matter what, and he had had enough of his father's moralizing. Bedoin ran off, telling his father that he had to go, because he had to get ready for school tomorrow, especially since everyone had done a good job today. His father shouted furiously at him to stop, for he had not yet finished his lectures, but his son did not care for his words. Bedoin never denied the fact that he loved being praised immensely. Bedoin was insanely happy that his talent is praised by all the people around him. He is always happy to hear compliments, especially since he has a nice rich house and good looks. He never had problems in relationships with girls and money problems. The guy often missed his trainings, where his father was waiting for him, for the reason that they were very boring for him. He thought that life was a very simple thing. Bedoin thought that even though his father always talks about the heart and stuff, a strong man is always a strong man, so he didn't see the point of going to boring training. Also, the guy thought that monsters were easy. He thought that maybe they became so restless because soon he could defeat them. While he was walking and speculating about this, a crowd of people formed near him, which interested him. It turned out that people were crowded around the rift, which was cordoned off by the police. The workers were explaining to the townspeople that they should forget about the team that went in there earlier, because even the rescue team had not returned from there yet, which meant that the rift could soon become dangerous. Seeing this picture, a crazy idea came into Bedoin's head. Pushing the crowd, he walked straight towards the rift. The guy thought that he just lacked combat experience. The guy rushed towards the rift, hoping to hit it. The police officers were horrified and shocked by the young man's actions. The townspeople were shocked. They shouted to the police officers that they should wait for the rank hunters and should save the child, because if he gets hurt, they will be responsible for it. At that moment, a mysterious girl came running to the rift. She apologized for being late. The girl asked the townspeople to move away from the rift, because it was very dangerous to be near it. Bedoin fell into the rift. At that moment, he was thinking about being the heir of the Bedoin family. He always dealt with monsters easily, and it was fine, especially the guy is stronger than the adults around him. He walked on the bloody ground, amongst the pieces of monsters. The guy came upon the very boss of the monsters. It was a huge hand with an eye that was capable of controlling a puppet. The guy saw the brutally killed members of the rescue team whose blood was dripping on the ground. Bedoin suddenly didn't feel good. He fell to the ground. The guy vomited violently. At that moment, a hand picked him up with chains and lifted him above the ground, shocked by what he saw. Bedoin didn't even react to it. The guy regained consciousness as he hung above the ground. Eyes wide open, he realized that today he would die in this rift. At that moment, a mysterious girl hit that rift and lightning swept the monster that hooked the guy into the sky. Bedoin looked at her as a goddess, for she had saved him. Holding her sword with one hand and holding the guy with the other, the girl was setting herself up for further battle. Bedoin didn't understand at all what was going on. He only looked at the beautiful girl. The girl looked at the guy and apologized for being late. She promised him that it would be over in a second. Bedoin was unable to say anything. He only wondered what was going on. The savior jumped up towards the monsters for battle. The devastated Bedoin realized that his body was not obeying him. He just could not move. At this moment, a monster was flying at him from the sky. The guy could only turn his head to look at it, and at this moment the girl saved him a second time. She covered him with herself. The monster had bloodied her back. The guy screamed in horror that her back had been ripped open in blood. However, the girl did not give the appearance that she was in pain. She asked the guy with a smile on her face if he was hurt. Bedoin replied that he was fine. The savior replied that she was very happy about it. The girl asked the guy to move a little farther away, for now she was going to show off a little. The guy suddenly remembered his father's words about someone who protects and leads people the right way with unbreakable intentions in his heart no matter what. Bedoin's world turned upside down. He realized many things. The boy let tears flow because he realized that he was insanely weak. After a few moments, the girl told the boy that she had defeated everyone, so now everything would be alright. She walked up to Bedoin and gently took his hand and told him it was time to go back. A crying Bedoin looked at the most beautiful girl and couldn't believe this was all happening to him live. The action of the chapter went back to the moment when Yamato Takeru and Bedoin were attacked by the Minotaur. The crazy guy's only thought was that he wanted to change and not be so weak anymore. Bedoin wished to change so that when he would fight side by side with that girl again, he wouldn't feel ashamed of his strength. The guy thought that he needed to become much stronger than he is now. Yamato Takeru looked at Bedoin with excitement in his eyes. At this time, the Minotaur took a run up straight towards the crazy guy. Bedoin once again fought off the column that the huge Minotaur threw at him, and mockingly asked if he really wanted to destroy absolutely all the columns that are here. This is savagery after all. Suddenly, the Minotaur turned away from the guy and charged at him with a slap. The guy felt unthinkable pain. Bedoin realized that the Minotaur must be a rank 1 monster, because it was incredibly strong, and this mutation was clearly caused by something. Yamato Takeru ran up to the guy, but the guy aggressively shouted to him that he had already asked him to step back and not interfere. Bedoin shouted that no one could ever break his spear. Yamato Takeru answered him to talk about something else. Yamato Takeru put his hand on the crazy guy's shoulder and said that his skills are admirable, and that is beyond doubt. However, he is too careful, and there is nothing wrong with being a little easier. It is worth remembering that his opponent is a monster and not a human. Suddenly, Bedoin felt a sensation new to him. Yamato Takeru explained to him that he had just awakened the dormant magical powers in him. This was a temporary enhancement, and later he would feel so bad that he would dream of death. Yamato supported his friend and said that it was time to send this Minotaur flying. Bedoin activated all his powers and made the strongest attack. This power wiped out the Minotaur. Immediately after that, Bedoin felt the same horrible feeling that Yamato Takeru was talking about. Bedoin shouted to Yamato Takeru that this feeling was indeed a horrible, killing feeling. Yamato noticed something moving in the remains of the Minotaur, so he walked over and stepped on the same strange creature that had gotten inside the bull before the mutation. He took the creature in his hand and began to examine it. He thought he had seen something similar before. It turned out that all this time a girl with long hair in an open back dress and a man with glasses were watching them. They were amazed that not only the Cyclops was defeated but also the Minotaur. The girl held a test tube in her hand which contained the very creature that caused the mutation. She said they made them stronger, and these kids were just useless. Walking over to the man, the girl hugged him. Holding a glass of alcohol, the man asked her if she could get it next. The girl confidently said she could. He then asked her why she was so confident in her words. The man said that even if they are stronger than a ranked hunter, still all humans are vulnerable to them. The girl replied that she was very familiar with that. She brushed the man's hair away from his neck and ran her hot tongue over his skin, which was covered in goosebumps, and then asked not to let their target slip away. The man grinned and asked if she thought he would let it slip. In his hands he held a picture of their target. He looked at the picture that showed Yamato Takeru. Our chapter starts with this picture. The townspeople were yelling at the man in the wagon, calling him a monster and thinking that he should disappear from this world. People on the street were yelling that this man needed to die soon, for he was otherworldly. Messiah himself sitting in the wagon didn't understand why this was so. His devastated gaze lowered to the floor. He remembered how people thanked him for his protection, how everyone was ready to defend him. A guy with a crown on his head and wearing expensive clothes suddenly turned to Tucker, saying that his power was weakening and he still relied on him. He was very sorry. The guy, whose hands were shackled, was almost crying, wondering why it was like this. Suddenly he felt a rock hit him in the face. Feeling the blow to his face, he looked around and saw a small child, whose eyes were filled with hatred, screaming that people like him deserved only death. The child was hugged by his mother, who looked at the shackled boy with disdain. A little later, the knight led him to his execution. Just as the sword was about to enter the guy's neck, Yamato Takeru woke up in a cold sweat. Yamato Takeru was shaking hard. It was hard for him to breathe and he clutched his neck in fear. After calming down a bit, he lay down on his knees saying that it was just a bad dream. It was breakfast time. There were 3 plates on the table. Yamato Takeru and his father were ready to start eating, and Yamato's mom was busy in the kitchen. Suddenly, Yamato Takeru took the juice and poured it into the plate of food and started eating. He was thinking about the fact that summer vacation was coming soon. The boy's parents noticed him pouring juice into the food and were afraid that something had happened to their son. Yamato Takeru continued to talk about his own thoughts. He was looking forward to the vacation, because Bedoin had promised him a personal meeting with Yusugi Kaike. The guy hoped that thanks to the meeting with her he could find the key to get Takeru's body back. Yamato Takeru was worried about whether he would disappear if he returned the body to its true owner. But there was one thing. The guy had already died once. He didn't hear his worried parents calling his name at all. Suddenly, Yamato Takeru came back to the real world and saw his parents' faces twisted with fear. They were calling his name and looking straight into his eyes. Such a suddenness made him scared. When his parents saw that he had regained consciousness, they began to ask if he was alright. As they saw his son's face turn pale, Yamato Takeru's mother shouted that he should go to the hospital immediately. Yamato tried to tell them that he was just having a bad dream, but his parents did not hear him. His father explained to his son that he had gone so far that he had lost his memory, which could be a sign of some other illness. Takeru's mother tilted her head and said that she couldn't bear it if something happened to him again. Yamato Takeru smiled, for he felt the love from his parents. The boy thought about the fact that he wanted to get that body back as soon as possible. He thanked his parents for their concern and said that he was fine, so there was no need to go to the hospital. However, his parents still thought that their son needed to get checked out. Yamato Takeru came to the hospital with his parents. They talked to the doctors about something while the guy just sat on a bench and texted Sawamura. Sawamura asked Yamato Takeru if he would be in school today. The guy told him that he wouldn't be in class because he was in the hospital. Sawamura told him that he wished him a speedy recovery. A couple seconds later, Sawamura sent a picture of himself in the chat room with a lot of other guys in it. He explained it was because they all wanted to text him through his phone. Yamato Takeru wondered who these people were. Suddenly, a bunch of guys appeared in the hospital. Yamato Takeru recognized their faces. They were from the Guardians of the Wind. When the guys saw the guy, they exclaimed loudly that he was the one. Yamato Takeru got up from his seat and walked over to them, saying that he had seen on the news that they were injured and now he was glad that they were fine. The guy with dark hair said quietly that they had been discharged today. Yamato Takeru saw a girl named Chika-chan among the guys and breathed out a sigh of relief because she hadn't said a word about him to the others. Chika-chan's friend noticed that the girl was very restless and asked if anything was wrong. But she hid her excitement and said that everything was fine and she was just happy to see them. One of the guys approached Yamato Takeru and asked what he wanted. The guy said he remembered him. Yamato was confused because he didn't know what he was talking about. Then the guy said that they were all from Kazami City and wanted to protect it. They had been together since childhood and the Wind Guardians had been formed long before that. However, it ended like that. Clenching his fist, the guy said that he was going to get stronger and since Yamato Takeru saved her, he would try to protect him next time. Yamato Takeru pretended not to understand anything at all and asked the guy what he was talking about. The guy suddenly laughed and said that he was right. And smiling, the guy said that if there were any problems, he would always be there for him no matter what. Then thanked Yamato Takeru one last time and left the hospital. When Yamato Takeru passed his checkup, he and his parents left the hospital. His dad explained to him that he couldn't stay home with him all day, and his mom didn't have a full vacation, so the guy would have to go home alone. Yamato replied that he was perfectly fine and everything would be fine. Yamato Takeru walked home and thought about how the people around him are very kind to Takeru. The guy is constantly receiving appreciation or concern from the people around him, and when that happens, he feels bad and there is a sense of discomfort. Yamato made a decision to protect these people until Takeru comes back. Yamato Takeru really wanted to do something about it, and wondered if the vacation could have started a little earlier. At this moment, Yamato Takeru was walking through the nooks and crannies of the city, and it was not good. He saw a monster being destroyed. Some man was shouting furiously and insulting the monster. Yamato Takeru thought it would be best to walk past the incident. However, the man and his friend named Yashiro spotted the guy. He asked him if it was the same guy and Yashiro said it was definitely that schoolboy. The man with dreadlocks on his head called the guy over to him. However, Yamato Takeru pretended not to hear. Then the man yelled out that he shouldn't ignore him as he was just getting rid of those monsters at work. The man's friend approached Yamato Takeru and apologized for the late introduction and gave his name. Then he said that this seemingly evil man's name was Tu, and they were rank A hunters working for the Uroboros Guild of rank C. Then he added that they came here on the orders of their leader. The man told the guy that he shouldn't be so wary. The other man explained to him that they only wanted to ask him about the incident at Kazami High School. Yamato Takeru only answered them that they should talk to the school itself. Yamato Takeru remembered very well what his girlfriend had said about the Uroboros Guild looking out for him. And they were known throughout Japan. There were a lot of bad rumors about them, so it was best to avoid them. Yashiro pulled out his phone and cryptically said that they just wanted to talk to him. And then, turning on his phone, Yashiro showed Yamato Takeru a picture of Sawamura and asked what would happen if they asked him. That really pissed the guy off. He didn't want his friend to get in trouble. Yamato Takeru had to agree to talk to the members of the Ouroboros Guild, because then they would hurt the innocent Sawamura. They arrived at an empty restaurant. Only their table in the entire room was occupied. Yashiro handed Yamato Takeru a stack of papers. The boy asked what was written in them. The man explained that all the conditions under which they would accept him into the Ouroboros Guild were written there. The guy immediately asked a question related to the Kazami school. Yashiro replied that it was just an act. Yashiro handed the guy another paper. Yamato Takeru took it in his hands and read that he was promised an annual income of 50 million or more. He was amazed at such numbers. The man said with a smile that he was worth a lot, so everyone would be happy if he helped their guild. Yamato Takeru thought about the fact that if he had met these guys in the beginning he probably would have hated the hunters. However, he was insanely glad that he had met Takamine-san. Yashiro waited for a while and asked Yamato Takeru what he would say about the conditions. His answer surprised the guys, because the guy got up from the table and said that he was going to refuse, because he just didn't want to be a hunter. As Yamato Takeru started to leave the restaurant, Yashiro and his friend smilingly decided that they were going to do something different and started to get their weapons. They stood up from the table, breaking it in half and smashing all the dishes. This caught Yamato Takeru's attention and he turned around to see what happened. Yashiro, stroking his sword, told Yamato Takeru that they would make him agree to join the guild by force since he didn't want to just do it. This chapter begins when the conflict between Yamato Takeru and Yashiro and his muscular comrade is set in motion. They shouted at the guy that they would force him to join the Ouroboros Guild. Yamato Takeru quietly mumbled back that they were being a bit cruel. Yashiro laughed loudly, saying that he was right. However, it didn't matter now. Yashiro, with a moving sword like a spine, ran straight at the guy. He tried to hit the guy, but Yamato Takeru was very clever in hiding from the sword. Also, the guy realized that the sword was poisonous, so he couldn't touch it. At that moment, a muscular man stood behind Yamato, about to attack the guy. However, Yamato Takeru was able to sense this as well and dodged a punch that could have gone straight to his back. The guy realized that now was his chance to charge his foot into the man's face. Yamato Takeru jumped up and delivered a powerful kick to the muscular man's cheek. He fell to the ground from such force, and at that moment Yashiro was advancing on Yamato and accidentally stepped on his comrade's face. Yashiro, with his back flying at the guy, yelled that he and his comrade would last long enough to kill him. Yamato Takeru spotted him and quickly rolled to the side to deflect the blow with his sword. Yashiro smiled hatefully and slammed his bendable sword into the ground and let a snake fly that could have caught up to the guy. However, Yamato Takeru was riding so high that he didn't fall for that trick. Yashiro shouted to the guy that as expected he had a swell reaction, and inside himself the man had an idea on how to defeat such a strong opponent. He decided that first he and his comrade needed to immobilize Yamato Takeru so that he could no longer dodge. With his flexible sword, he started to guide the guy right into the hands of his muscular comrade. The latter was able to grab the guy and lifted him above the ground. He shouted to Yashiro that his face was far from a springboard and not to be ignored. Yashiro didn't care about his comrade's words, all he wanted was the guy. While Yamato Takeru was immobilized, Yashiro decided it was a good time for the poison fang. He was going to stab the sword with poison into the guy's chest. Yamato Takeru could already see the sword point in front of him. However, Yamato Takeru wasn't going to die, so he jumped above the man who was holding him and was about to strike. But Comrade Yashiro had time to activate the Guardian Protector. Since Comrade Yashiro had activated the Guardian, the blows from Yamato Takeru felt a little weaker, but the pain was still present. He felt every muscle tear and then instantly recover. The man then decided to strike with a swinging punch. Yamato Takeru realized this and managed to activate the Guardian Guard, catching such a powerful punch under his shield. This swinging blow was so powerful that when it came in contact with the shield, a powerful shockwave appeared, blowing everything around. The building nearby turned into ruins. The surrounding people did not realize what was happening. Yamato Takeru fixed the arm of the muscular man so that he couldn't move, but aggressively said that it was a careless attitude. At this time, Yashiro, without wasting a chance, tried to let a hard coil at Yamato. A spinning sword with reinforcement flew at the guy. However, Yashiro again failed as Yamato Takeru had a shield that protected his neck. The man angrily mumbled that it was no good as expected. Yamato Takeru activated his vulnerability and grabbed the muscular man tighter, and toppled him over himself right onto Yashiro. The muscular man literally sealed the skinny and frail Yashiro into the ground. Yamato Takeru, watching them lurch, said that was about right. Yamato Takeru scratched the back of his head and thought about the fact that they seemed to neglect using their monster fighting skills in public. Suddenly Yashiro found strength in himself. He was able to pull himself up a little with over 100 pounds of weight on him. Yashiro, breathing heavily, began to say that this was probably what the leader had said. Using force would yield 0 results, and suggested that Yamato Takeru switch to hostage-taking tactics. Yamato became a little wary and continued to listen to the man who had already managed to get out from under the muscular man. Yashiro said that truth be told they always have someone on guard in case they need to kidnap, and then began to hint that his friend had been kidnapped. Yamato Takeru began to frantically worry that they had kidnapped Sawamura. Yashiro started poking the phone with Araki Kuna's picture in the guy's face and asking what Yamato would do if they hurt Araki. However, they didn't know that they weren't really friends, so Yamato used magic to throw Yashiro to the ground and asked with a sneer, "So what if they hurt Araki-kun?" Inside himself, Yamato Takeru thought about going to go find the guy who was following Araki and punch him. While he was standing over the half-dead men, Yashiro's phone rang. Yamato went to the device and read the name of the contact. It was Hebikawa-san. The guy realized that he was most likely getting a call from the leader who was giving orders. The guy decided to pick up the phone. Hebikawa immediately started to say that as expected. Yamato Takeru showed himself, and the whole time he was watching him. Yamato Takeru asked what the leader of such a large guild wanted from a peaceful man. Hebikawa replied that he wanted the guy to join their guild. Yamato replied to him that he had already made his choice and was not going to join. To his words, the leader replied that he would report him to the Hunters Association. Yamato Takeru became very angry. However, Hebikawa laughed loudly into the phone and said that he was just joking and wasn't going to tell anyone about anything. After saying that, Hebikawa began to say in a serious voice that he would not tell anyone about him for the reason that from that moment on, he would exist as his secret weapon, and he would try his best to teach him that there were no circumstances. Suddenly, Yamato received a text message on his phone. As he pulled out his phone, Hebikawa told him that for making him watch something fun, he had sent him an interesting picture. As soon as Yamato saw the picture sent, he was immediately horrified. Hebikawa asked the guy if he liked the picture. Yamato Takeru saw that the picture was of his parents lying unconscious in the hospital. The guy started to ask what he had done to them with anxiety in his voice. Hebikawa replied in a frantic voice that he had only given them poison, and there was no antidote in this world. Yamato Takeru's hands shook and his face changed drastically. Hebikawa laughed loudly into the guy's handset, saying that his emotion on his face was much better than a relaxed face. Hebikawa had the antidote, and after bragging about it to Yamato Takeru, texting him his location and how to come to him, he said that if he wanted the antidote, let him come to him. He also added that he should come alone, without anyone else around. Yamato Takeru threw Yashiro's phone right on his head, which led to bad consequences. The man died. However, Yamato Takeru mumbled that it wouldn't have been so easy if he hadn't done that. After all, if he didn't do that, they would only be in his way. The chapter started when Yamato Takeru came to the hospital to visit his poisoned parents. It was incredibly hard for the guy to look at his poison-stricken parents, because he thought that it was all his fault, and he felt sorry for them. Yamato Takeru was walking through the evening city, which was already filled with drunk people and callers to local bars and clubs. One of them flew up to the guy and started saying that it was dangerous enough here at this time, so he should go to their place and relax. Then he started hinting that they had girls who could help with that. However, Yamato Takeru shoved him aside with one hand. A man in a suit came over to that guy and started swearing that he should stop soliciting minors because they make a lot of trouble. Finally, Yamato came to the right building. He was met by the same girl who always goes with Hebikawa. She smilingly told the guy that they were waiting for him. The girl came closer to the guy and told him her name was Echidna, and Hebikawa asked her to escort him. She pointed her hand in the direction Yamato Takeru should go next. Echidna led the guy through another restaurant, and told him that they were used as bases all over Japan, and the one he was in earlier was also one of their bases. Yamato Takeru immediately started to say that he wasn't the one who destroyed it. The girl replied that she was aware of that, and the repair costs would be deducted from Yashiro and Shima's paychecks. Walking to the next room, the Echidna led the boy to the rift, and explained that inside it, Hebikawa was already waiting for Yamato Takeru. Not thinking long, Yamato Takeru entered the rift. He saw a horde of huge monsters with weapons in front of him and a small compared to them Hebikawa. The man smiled and said he was looking forward to seeing them. Yamato cautiously surveyed the area. Hebikawa noticed Yamato Takeru's condition and grinned and asked if he was worried. And after all, these monsters obey absolutely anything he tells them. Yamato Takeru turned his attention to an ordinary goblin whose leg was grabbed by the very creature that caused the huge bull to mutate. Suddenly, that creature went into the goblin's mouth, and then he too mutated into a terrifying huge creature. The ordinary goblin was turned into a huge scary monster with a muscular body. Yamato Takeru mumbled that he realized it was Hebikawa's doing. Hebikawa laughed out loud and said that it was all just to test him, and he enjoyed watching the newcomer named Gadu roar and scream. Yamato Takeru, angry, asked the man what his purpose was. Hebikawa replied that he simply wished to destroy absolutely everything. Fixing his glasses, Hebikawa said he wants to destroy all those damn rules and idiotic guilds with hunters following them. He wants to destroy absolutely everything and rule this country himself, along with those monsters. Yamato Takeru, after listening to the man, replied that it was impossible. The guy explained that no matter how many monsters they, with rank, enhance or control, other hunters with rank would be able to handle them. Hebikawa smiled and said that he was right. However, he had other trump cards and took out a flask of liquid from his pocket and threw it into Yamato Takeru's hands. Yamato Takeru asked the man if this was the antidote. Hebikawa replied that he was going to give it to him after he showed the species. After all, he had no intentions of making him his enemy. Yamato replied that it was unfair, for he had kidnapped his parents. The man said in a rough voice that he completely understood his feelings or desire to hide his powers. And clenching his fist, Hebikawa shouted that it was worth thinking about why powerful people like him had to live this way. And it was because if they were exposed, they would be kept chained in captivity, using public opinion as a shield, and no one would accept you if you have little power. Hebikawa smiled and explained to Yamato Takeru that he would just never be understood by others, and then asked, "So why does he hold back his power?" The boy frowned his eyebrows at the man. Hebikawa was trying to piss the guy off even more, saying that most likely he was insanely eager to get away with it, because living like him was incredibly cramped. The man approached Yamato Takeru and with a skewed expression shouted that he could change all this and power would be everything in this world. Reaching out his hand to the guy, he asked him to join him. Yamato Takeru suddenly threw a glass flask of antidote on the ground, which shattered. Hebikawa was surprised by this action. Yamato then asked him if it was the basilisk eye poison he had poisoned his parents with. It turned out that Yamato Takeru was able to cure his parents with magic. He told Hebikawa about it. Hebikawa was angry that Yamato Takeru knew about this poison even though it had not yet appeared in this world. The echidna was also surprised that the guy knew about the basilisk eye. Yamato Takeru said loudly that he only came here to nail it in place, because the power it hides exists only to protect his precious peaceful days. The guy then said that he would fight, for those who touch what he holds dear would be torn to shreds. Hebikawa smiled and said that he was sorry they couldn't find common ground. And then making a wave, all the monsters ran straight at the guy who was all alone. Yamato Takeru wasn't scared at all to fight so many monsters. After all, he had a lot of experience in fighting different creatures of different power. He simply activated the flame flash and destroyed all those mutated monsters. Hebikawa corrected his glasses and said that he still wasn't going to stop until he got tired. After saying that, the man summoned another horde of monsters. Yamato Takeru realized that Hebikawa is a summoner. He specifically summons monsters and makes them obey with magic, and their numbers are large. Yamato decided that since Hebikawa is a ranked hunter, he can't be soft on him. The guy summoned an explosion with which he destroyed the next monsters. This explosion destroyed all living things. However, Hebikawa was protected and survived. He said that this was the kind of power he expected to see from Yamato Takeru. He added that it was quite catchy. Hebikawa called out to Echidna. The girl approached the man and asked if it was time to open the cards. Then she added that she would let him do as he saw fit since it was already his. Hebikawa replied that he understood her and added that he would do it with pleasure. Yamato didn't realize what was going on, for the wind had picked up. The man shouted that he would use the monster to destroy the monster and summoned Hydra. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared out of nowhere that looked like a dragon with 8 heads and sharp spikes all over its body. Yamato Takeru was terrified, because for the first time in his life saw this creature. He realized that in this world once existed something like this. The guy decided to act and launched a fire flame at the monster, but everything did not go according to plan. After all, the monster didn't care about the fire. Yamato Takeru realized that this monster does not react to pain. Then he assumed that each head feels pain individually, and decided to test this by cutting off one of the heads. However, it instantly regenerated. Yamato realized that it can regenerate. Hibikawa started laughing angrily, shouting that Hydra was immortal and no matter how strong Yamato Takeru was, he still couldn't win. The guy replied to the man that whether it be monsters or other creatures, there is no such thing as immortality. Yamato Takeru told Hibikawa in a serious voice that he fought such opponents all the time, so don't look down on him. Our chapter begins with the words, "Peerless hidden fantasy about a former messiah who was feared for his power." Yamato Takeru flew above the monster called Hydra and thought about the fact that he couldn't be an immortal living creature, and if it was all regeneration, he would try to blow all the heads off in one go. Guy noticed that the smallest head was too active. Guy was greatly annoyed by the smallest head, for it is trying to stop him from earning mana. He disarmed it and depriving the dragon of 2 heads activated the freeze. However, they immediately regenerated. Yamato Takeru had time to calculate that it takes 3 seconds for a head to regenerate, so he decided that he would use magic that could be quickly applied to it within those 3 seconds. The guy was able to cut off all the heads, and wondered if this monster had any other weaknesses. The guy was not helped by the tactic of cutting off all the heads, for they grew back. Then he wondered what he should do next. Yamato Takeru decided to jump into the sky with a run-up and look at the monster from a different angle. When Hibikawa saw Yamato's plan, he shouted that whatever he did would be useless. However, the guy benefited from that jump, because he saw the Hydra's tail going into the ground. The guy realized that the weak point of this monster was the tail, so he put all his strength into an explosion aimed at the tail of the huge monster. The heads felt a wild pain and fell to the ground exhaustedly. Hibikawa and Echidna were surprised that the guy was able to handle this monster. Yamato turned to the man and said that now it was his turn. Hibikawa replied that he was a damned rascal. Suddenly many rifts appeared around Yamato Takeru and out of each one came the heads of hissing snakes. Yamato decided that he needed to run straight at Hibikawa so that the rifts appearing around him would not have time to open. He succeeded and rapidly approached the man. However, one of the rifts appeared right in front of his face. The head of a hissing snake coming out of the hole came hard towards Yamato. The guy happened to look into its eyes and started to freeze. Hibikawa began to gloat, because the guy met the eyes of the basilisk. The man was already sure that he was the winner. But Yamato Takeru managed to utter a word of recovery, so he was not petrified and immediately rushed towards Hibikawa. Yamato Takeru swung at the man to hit the man in the face with all his might. However, the man managed to activate the Guardian Protector. Yamato Takeru struck so hard that even the activated shield sagged, but it still held its weight. The guy wasn't going to stop and flew towards Hibikawa again to hit him harder. However, Yamato tripped over Echidna. The girl smiled and told the guy to remember that she was here too. The guy looked at her nasty smile unhappily. The Echidna pointed 3 tridents at the guy. However, the guy activated 3 shields and protected himself. He bounced sharply behind the girl's back and flew into her with both feet. The girl fell right on top of Hibikawa. Yamato jumped up to her and placing a hand on her face activated an explosive flash. Chaos ensued, and it was hard to make out anything. The guy mumbled that he knew she was a demon. The girl who had horns and wings was surprised that the guy knew about the poison and that she was a demon. Most likely Yamato Takeru, the man from space. Yamato Takeru slowly approached the girl, talking about how he absolutely always kills demons. Fear appeared in Echidna's eyes. The girl couldn't understand why she was gripped by fear. She felt as if she was now facing the demon lord. She was confused and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Hibikawa rose from the ground and hugged Echidna and turned to her. Hibikawa said in a tired voice that all the monsters, including Hydra, were dead, and even he had no mana left, so his plan was over, so she had to think about what to do next. There was doubt in the girl's eyes, but she decided to tell the man that she could go with her own plan, for in truth she was going to do it after the hunters were exhausted. Hibikawa asked frustrated, did she really want to go against him? The girl said she did. Hibikawa asked the girl what his plan was. The Echidna replied that she needed him to buy time. The man mumbled that he would do anything for her. Meanwhile, Yamato tried to kill Echidna, who flew up to the dead Hydra. Hibikawa jumped at Yamato Takeru from the back asking if he had already forgotten about him, but the guy easily charged his fist into the man's face from the back. Hibikawa mumbled that snakes are resilient and began to strangle the guy with his staff, at which point Yamato Takeru felt alarmed. Meanwhile, Echidna hugged Hydra and said that the spatial wall separating the 2 worlds with a small hole like a gate would not cause much harm, but she wanted to get rid of the wall completely. Yamato pulled away from Hibikawa and looked at Echidna anxiously. The girl mumbled as she spawned her child that would kill even a god. The girl spawned a huge monster called Typhon. It was a huge demon with many snakes around it. Compared to it, Yamato looked like a speck. Yehida was able to break the spatial wall and chaos came to the city. Many monsters appeared and killed ordinary people. A peerless hidden fantasy about a former messiah who was feared for his power. The huge creature called Typhon looked simply terrifying. A huge beast with a bunch of snake necks was blowing streams of fire straight at Yamato Takeru. While all this was happening, an exhausted Hibikawa was lying on the ground nearby. He suddenly smiled and said, bleeding, that he had to. The action of our chapter went back 10 years. Hibikawa remembered his first entry into the gate. How all his squad mates admired him, saying that the first entry at 13 was very strong, and it must be hard, but he should be able to cope. Hibikawa trusted them and was glad he was in their care. However, it turned out that when they encountered the monster, all of these guys ran away with terror in their eyes. It turned out to be the first time they had seen the creature. Hibikawa was the last to run. He tried to grab onto one of his comrades, but the guy just pushed him away and he collapsed to the ground. The boy looked at the guys who ran ahead of him, hoping they would help him, but they also shouted at him that since he had passed through the gate at 13, he could handle the monster himself. At that moment the kid's world turned upside down. He realized he had been set up. The mutation-causing creature crawled over to the guy and crawled up to his elbow. Suddenly a gentle female voice appeared in the void. It was an Echidna. She was saying that Hibikawa was a real poor thing, lagging behind the others. She crawled closer to Hibikawa and quietly said that she would save him, but in return for one favor. Hibikawa managed to survive after such a terrible event. The young man himself and those guys went to the hospital. When he started to feel a little better, scandalized a lot that they used him as bait and he almost died, he only replied that they will not be anything for it. Those who had set him up just lied that it was all an accident. One of them was angry with the young man that a man had died and he had a conscience to say such things. The expert listened to both sides and said that since their testimonies were not confirmed, nothing could be done. The expert said that nothing can be done in this situation, because these are the rules of the union. In the evening of that day, Hibikawa met with Echidna and said that he was ready to accept her terms. The girl hugged the young man, and he told her that he was ready to destroy the alliance of hunters, and will do absolutely everything as long as she gives him strength. After these words, Hibikawa swallowed the creature, leading to mutation. After a time, Hibikawa took revenge on his traitors. Shima brutally beat his abusers, and asked the guy if it would be right to let them live. The guy replied that it was much more fun to let them live and see hell. Hibikawa corrected his glasses and told Echidna that this is where it would start. They would destroy absolutely everything. The chapter's action returned to the moment of Yamato Takeru's battle with the monster Typhon. An exhausted Hibikawa was lying on the ground and quietly talking about how his revenge had stopped halfway. Yet he had faith in Echidna. Suddenly, he heard a deafening sound. Hibikawa saw Yamato Takeru's silhouette in a flash of fire, and was madly surprised that he was still alive. Yamato Takeru realized that such power was not working, as the monster still looked alive and taunted him. The Echidna who was watching was shouting that this is just great, and the monster is insanely strong. At this time, Yamato Takeru was trying to hide from all the snake attacks. The Echidna was yelling at the guy that he couldn't do anything but dodge. Yamato Takeru tried not to be distracted by her words to be more careful, and if he didn't, he would have fallen into the snake trap. The Echidna told the guy that she and Hydra teamed up with each other to become the strongest creature. Yamato Takeru decided that their joining together was important. The Echidna continued to scream hysterically that now even they wouldn't be able to ignore her. Meanwhile, Yamato Takeru continued to dodge the attacks. Yamato felt that if he didn't end this quickly, Takeru's body might be exhausted. The Echidna yelled that there was no way out and decided that going higher would be a great solution. The demon girl shouted that she was feeling the best feelings in her life right now. Yamato Takeru bounced off her a bit and grinned at her having fun. The guy jumped up and hit the snake with his spear, however nothing came out. There was a shield. The Echidna began to resent him for being so rude to a nice lady. Meanwhile, Yamato jumped up into the sky. As the guy jumped up into the sky, the Echidna screamed that she wished him dead. Yamato Takeru had the great idea to use an air blast that caused chaos all around. However, the guy kept his guard up. He was able to cleave the monster in half, separating Hydra from Echidna. The girl was horrified, not understanding how this could have happened. Yamato Takeru explained to her that since she was in control, she was much easier to deal with than Hydra. The girl started screaming madly for him to die, screaming that she could change everything. However, Yamato Takeru was well aware that her consciousness had begun to collapse and she would no longer be able to control the power of typhos. The girl started screaming even more furiously that she would destroy Yamato Takeru completely, his arms, legs, brain, and then his family and friends. The Echidna's face began to pale and her skin began to tighten. Yamato Takeru stared callously at the girl, who suddenly began to cry. She suddenly started crying, not realizing why she had gotten this power. Why was she still afraid? Echidna hoped madly that even they couldn't mock her now. Memories of other demons that had harassed her surfaced in her mind. Echidna pictured in her head a picture of her returning to the demon house after defeating Yamato Takeru. The girl with the ponytails came up to her and asked if she really came back after being defeated by a human. The male demon said that it was also just a small request. Also later, he told the girl that she should discipline her subordinate with dignity. After all, they don't need weaklings. The girl herself was sad that you can't even play normally with Echidna. The girl, who gradually began to disappear, decided that it was necessary to take herself in hand and kept saying that all her weaknesses are only in her head. Echidna was sure that now she was much stronger than she was before, and her most cherished dream was to get revenge on absolutely all the people who mocked her. She wanted to do anything to bring that girl and man to despair and break them completely. That was why Echidna wanted to start by killing Yamato Takeru, because he was the man from the prophecy they were looking for. Yamato Takeru was sipping his tea when Saint Edelweiss called out to him by name. The girl, lightly bouncing on the spot, said that there were quite a lot of people traveling with them this time. However, it was not bad once in a while. Taking a sip of hot tea, Yamato said that it was indeed quite crowded. Saint Edelweiss asked him, but was it possible to refuse these people? After all, they even offered to join the party to subdue the demon lord. Yamato Takeru replied that it was dangerous. Besides, he thinks they wouldn't be able to keep up with him. The girl looked at him and said that he was right. The girl suddenly thought about it and said that he leaves his horse and suddenly starts running, or decides to climb a cliff. Listening to this, Yamato was very confused. Saint Edelweiss asked him if he really couldn't trust them. The boy suddenly remembered his old comrades and said that it was easier for him to be alone after all. The girl came closer to him and said with a smile that she was here too. Yamato Takeru thanked her for always being there for him and helping him heal his wounds. Yamato realized that he had only scratched the surface that day. However, Yamato Takeru now knew the location of her real body, so all he had to do was kill her. While reasoning, Yamato never stopped dodging Tifo's surprise attacks. The Echidna mockingly mouthed that the guy's movements had become very dull. Yamato fell to the ground, trying to catch his breath. However, they couldn't rest for long, for Tifos wouldn't stop making whipping blows. Echidna asked the guy if he was the one who said it was going to be easy. Yamato Takeru realized that he had a problem because Takeru's body had reached its limit and he could no longer use strong spells quickly. However, it was the same for Echidna, for Tifos was most likely absorbing her life force to move. The girl suddenly told the guy that if he realized where Tifos gets his powers from, he should have realized that waiting for her death is useless because the monster absorbs the powers of the people of this world. The Echidna told the lad that Tifos' followers were pouring into Japan and asked if they should cross the sea. The girl then added that it absolutely didn't matter what he did, as everyone would die anyway. Yamato meanwhile was thinking that if that was true, he should immediately go back to the other side. However, he doesn't know if Takeru's body will be able to move if he kills her. The girl grinned at his expression and decided that it was a good time to show him something. A rift appeared in the sky. Opening it, one could see Japan filled with monsters. The girl once again said that if he killed her, Tifo's power would get out of control. She smiled widely, for she was sure that he wouldn't touch her. Suddenly the guy started to gather the power of lightning in his hand. Seeing this, Echidna started screaming that she shouldn't be killed. Meanwhile, Tokyo was in chaos. Many people took to the streets of the city to protect the others from the scary monsters. Some teams gathered and all fought together against the monsters. The girl with the torch summoned the creatures to one point so that the guys with guns could deal with them there. They took their spears and started spinning around, destroying all the monsters in their path. Many peaceful people, children and women, managed to hide in shelters. At such a moment, many people became more united, appreciating and thanking everyone who helped and saved people. Bedoin also came to the rescue. He shouted that he and his fellow are in society. He said to admire Takamine Sakura, and to unite in the name of her beauty to uphold her beautiful ideals. The boy bravely fought the monsters, shouting that they existed to protect the peace and citizens of this city from the devilish monsters. He was good at fighting, destroying monsters. Bedoin was proud of himself. The other guys praised him, saying that soon he would be able to get a rank. However, suddenly the guy was grabbed by a monster. The huge monster lifted Bedoin into the sky. His comrades began to feel very worried for the guy, as he was immobilized and all alone in the hands of the terrifying creature. The guy was saved by Sakura herself, and Bedoin realized that he still had a long way to go with the rank. The girl went to the roof of one of the buildings. Sakura herself, with the help of a special station, led a beam of justice in all of Tokyo. All the monsters died from such a high voltage. The people watching the city saw that the elimination of the large outbreak of monsters in Tokyo was successfully completed. The young man standing with the adults were shocked with the strength of Sakura herself. One of the men said that this was the entire S rank. Sakura herself pronounced that she absolutely doesn't care what gets in her way, she will definitely disarm it. Yamato Takeru had accumulated a very powerful energy. The echidna began to stammer, asking how powerful his power was. She had never seen anything like this before. The girl felt her subordinates begin to vaporize and she was unable to stop it. Yamato suddenly remembered the question about trust that St. Edelweiss asked. The guy believed that it was because he was endowed with a power that greatly surpassed other people, and that was why he had distanced himself from them before they would. He fully realized that he was doing wrong, because those comrades had always been kind to him, and he was too proud of himself to look around. Yamato Takeru called out to Habikawa by name. He told him that most people wouldn't become strong, but if he looked around properly, he could find other people. The man didn't understand why the guy was saying that. Yamato Takeru then turned to the echidna, thanking her. One was very angry, for she felt wild pain, but asked why he was thanking her. Yamato explained that she helped him realize that he was not fighting alone. The boy picked up a huge spear. Breathing heavily, the echidna turned to Tifos and said that it looked like she still wanted to save his life, but was willing to let him go completely. Now the monster could absorb her life force more freely. The girl was sure that if she gave all her strength to the monster, she could win, so she asked Tifos to try one last time. Bleeding, the girl said that with that she was sending it to the next dimension. The girl screamed wildly again that Yamato Takeru must die. Yamato didn't know what awaited him. He expected Takeru's body to disappear, so he apologized to Takeru in advance that it would be a bit difficult in the future. He grabbed his spear tighter and took a run up. The guy threw the spear, creating a thunder of terrible judgment with lightning. Yamato was insanely scared for Takeru's body. However, there was no other choice. He needed to destroy Yechiden. The spear met Tifos and the girl screamed that it was impossible. Habikawa, lying on the ground, was shocked at what was happening. There was an incredible explosion that blew the whole place apart. The protagonist hit the echidna with such destructive force that the woman flew upward and slammed into the wall. After hitting it with all her might, the woman felt the spatial wall behind her begin to collapse. The echidna looked at the guy with sadness and fear and thought that he didn't just kill Typhus, he wiped him out. It was a power beyond what humans are capable of. Echidna fell to her knees, not realizing what was going on here. Unable to rise to his feet, the genie looked at the echidna. The woman felt a flaming blade being held to her throat. Takeru simply warned the woman that he wanted to ask her something. He would like to know what prophecy she was talking about. The echidna lowered her gaze and admitted that she was talking about a prophecy of power like Takeru's. Before she could finish speaking, someone's hand formed behind the echidna from the portal. The hand pierced through the woman's chest and the echidna fell silent. A mysterious knight emerged from the dark portal and continued to pierce the echidna's body deeper and deeper. The echidna spat out a pool of blood, while Jin and Takeru watched in shock. Takeru jumped back, away from the intruder. The woman realized that her wounds were not regenerating and felt herself dying. She decided to take one last look at her genie. Bleeding to death, the dying echidna proceeded from her last strength to the place where the genie lay. Terrified and powerless to do anything, the genie reached out his hand to her. It was a pleasure for him to work with a creature like the echidna. Earlier, the guy had told her that they would use each other anyway, and suggested that she get along to some extent. Earlier, when they were in the company of other people, a certain guy had noticed that Sis had a bad tolerance for spicy things, and admitted that there was something cute about her. Then a genie came into the diner and told the echidna that he had found something suitable for her. The girl liked the jewelry given by the genie and said that it was quite beautiful. Even though it was just a bracelet, it looked pretty good. Back then, they were in a vagabond guild that didn't fit into the Hunters Association. He felt that she should have joined them too. The woman dropped to her knees in front of Na Jenin and lifted his chin with her hand. She smiled warmly at him and admitted that she had a lot of fun with him. In her last seconds of life, the woman kissed the genie on the lips before falling into his arms unconscious. With a terrible pain in his heart, the genie hugged the dead echidna's body tightly, after which he gently placed her on the ground. The genie went out of his mind with tremendous anger and lunged at the echidna's killer. With tears in his eyes, Jin yelled that he would kill the man. But no sooner had he reached his goal than a portal formed right in front of his eyes, from which a small fist appeared. A small smiling girl with horns flew out of the portal and hit the genie in the face. Her blow was so strong that it threw the genie backwards towards the dead body of the echidna. The girl looked carefully at the fallen guy and thought he was still alive. A certain man came up behind her that lifted the Sukuna Jin by the scruff of the neck. The guy named Rayer was telling her about how the girl shouldn't have walked alone. The girl said that he was late. She thought that she and the Dark Knight together were pretty fast and the princess would swear at them. Rayer looked at the Dark Knight and told him that he should have obeyed too. The girl shouted to Rayer that the Dark Thrall couldn't speak, so it would be bad if he said something like that. Rayer believed that it was Sukuna's fault in the first place. An argument eventually broke out between the two, but the hero decided to interrupt them. The guy pointed his flaming blade at them and asked who they were. The group immediately forgot about their arguments and stared at the Takaru in surprise. The boy smiled and apologized for not introducing himself and called himself Rayer. The girl that quickly waved her hands introduced herself as Sukuna Tan and greeted her brother. And the one who stood behind them was called the Dark Knight. Rayer admitted that even they didn't know his real name since that person couldn't speak. Takaru realized that they were not at all flattering right now and felt that these people were quite strong. The girl thought about the fact that if she showed more strength and fought, Takaru's body would be broken and didn't know what to do. She asked the guy not to be so careful. Rayer smiled at the hero and said that they had only come here today to take care of this traitor, and they had no intentions of fighting him. At the same moment, Sukuna freed herself from the Rayer's grip and jumped up. She called out to her brother and suggested that they play. The boy had already gotten into a fighting stance to strike, but someone grabbed the girl's body with shiny chains and she hung right in front of the Takaru's face. Sukuna didn't realize what was happening and became upset. Rayer reminded her that the princess would be mad at him. At that moment, Rayer remembered something he hadn't done and channeled his magic chains into the dead echidna's body. The chains pierced the dead woman's chest and went through her. Rayer lifted the dead body, whereupon her shiny snake-shaped bracelet fell to the ground. Rayer smiled and smugly exclaimed that they would collect it. Takaru didn't realize what it was and questioned Rayer, but Rayer spread his hands and replied that it was a trade secret. He created a portal behind his group and motioned for them to head back. No sooner had he entered the portal than the flaming blade of the Takaru stopped near his face. The hero warned them that they wouldn't be able to just leave. Rayer smirked and reminded the guy that he was already obviously tired and asked him not to take it personally. The hero looked intimidatingly into Rayer's eyes, but the guy only smirked and told Tucker that they would meet soon. Dissolving into the black portal, Sukuna said goodbye to her little brother and then they disappeared. Takaru realized that they were demons, which meant that this was the other world he knew about. The genin's body still lay near the fallen bracelet of his echidna. Many people had died, and the damage caused by this major outbreak was unprecedented. The ringleader behind the incident was quickly arrested by the Hunters Association. Since the genie did not resist his arrest, the Hunters Association decided to transport him for nothing. Jin believed that most of the people would not become strong, but if he looked around properly, he would find other people. On Jin's arm was a snake-shaped bracelet that was left from an echidna. Jin gazed at the association. They had never been on the side of justice. Jin was sure that he didn't have much left. While Jin was thinking about it, their truck was suddenly attacked. Due to the heavy gunfire, the truck flew upwards and fell on its roof. Jin slowly climbed out of the shattered glass, not realizing what was wrong. He heard a certain voice lift his arm. The voice noticed that their master had a sullen face and the genie looked up. The mysterious man told the master that thanks to him the Ouroboros had been disbanded. It was a couple people from his guild who came to the genie's rescue. They reminded their master that if he was hit, he had to hit them back. The guy held out the staff with the snake to the genie and offered to settle the matter properly. Jin stared at his fellow guildmates in shock, before pressing his lips together and awkwardly grabbing the snake-shaped staff. Jin pulled himself together and led his fellow guildmates forward. He said that now those who were ready to die were walking with him and Jin intended to end it. Meanwhile, the hero walked out of Kazami Municipal Hospital as if nothing had happened and looked up at the clear sky, covering himself from the sun with his palm. The guy thought about the fact that it would soon be summer vacation. Rayer and his team returned back to the castle. He happily told the princess that on her orders they had dealt with the echidna and recovered the stolen Pandora. Rayer revealed that he had also released the guy he thought was from the Messiah prophecy. The princess smiled and replied that it was fine. She considered that their time had not come yet and looked at the Sukuna that was lying on her lap. Sukuna was upset that she couldn't play with her baby brother. The girl almost cried, but the princess stroked the girl's cheek like a cat and Sukuna calmed down. The princess raised her head and looked at the dark night. She smirked and suggested that it was quite possible. The next day, the Hunters Association held a meeting at Japan's headquarters. The meeting was led by an Ease-rank hunter called Lionheart Riniasaku. The man thought they had contacted all the Ease-rank hunters for an emergency meeting, but at least he thought so. But he was shocked that there were only 5 people in the large auditorium. He exclaimed that it was too strange and he didn't understand what was going on. Riniasaku didn't understand why the hunters didn't come at that particular time and thought they just didn't care about Japan. Sagu didn't understand how he could be wrong in this situation. One of the hunters told the man that the Hebikawa had been stripped of Ease rank, so there were only 49 of them. Sagu slammed the table and yelled that he had just rounded up the number. Sakura raised her hand and said that there was no point in yelling at them further since they were the only ones who had responded. Sagu sighed heavily and apologized, agreeing with her. Another huntress decided to intervene in their conversation. It was an ace-ranked hunter named Stargirl Karen. The girl thought that holding real-life meetings in a place and time like this was rather outdated in their time. She implied that she was lazy and didn't want to come here. Sagu said that they were going to discuss a rather private topic. In that case, Stargirl suggested that they meet somewhere private, go to a bar and eat something tasty. One of the hunters supported her and blurted out that he would like to eat some hakon. The third hunter supported them and said he would take a bappu in that case. Sagu felt himself starting to boil. The man thought that the hunters of the association had blown it and decided to avoid their duties. He shouted to the entire audience that if they spent their taxes on all sorts of bars and brothels, they would have been burned alive a long time ago. Stargirl winked at the man and said that they were already laboring, but in her case she was doing it rather lazily. Sagu lost his temper and yelled that they private hunters were doing what they wanted and they of the association had to toil for them. The unnecessary hunters ended up spending too much money. The girl suggested they stop with the chatter. She didn't care what they all said, but they still defended them. Sagu was so angry that he was literally grinding his teeth. Sprocket blushed and told the man that he had a pretty scary face. One of the hunters Ease rank named Hideo Igarashi walked up to one of the guys and gave him a not bad knock on the back. He asked the Tenku to gather himself and sit up straight. Hideo had always told him that hunching over was not good for him. A hunter with rank, the assassin of the Abyss Tenku asked not to be called by his name. Besides, he had said it many times before. Tenku covered his ears and said that Hideo was quite loud and his ears were already hurting. Hideo grinned and clapped the guy on the back and exclaimed that he was pretty cool in his 24 years, being S-class and without a girlfriend. The guy frowned and told the old man that talking to him was rather tedious. Hideo decided to ask Karen about the Tenku and called out to the girl. Karen approached the embarrassed assassin and confessed that she had the same type. She thought her type was a pretty kind guy, willing to do anything for the sake of the weak. She called the guy by name, which made the Tenku blush even more. The girl told the guy that he was not suitable and apologized for that. At the same moment, the Tenku pressed his lips together as his illusions dissolved into reality. Tenku smirked and said he was rejected even without a confession and asked to go home. Hideo decided not to give up and asked Sakura for her opinion. Sakura apologized, but she wasn't interested in a relationship. Tank became completely uncomfortable. He didn't understand what he came here for and decided to go home. Hideo asked the Tenku to keep his nose up, as he was sure to find a suitable partner soon. Karen smiled and agreed with him, but the Tenku told the two of them that they were being rather rowdy. Sagu ordered them to stop figuring things out. At that moment, a man walked into their classroom and was glad that they were all in good spirits. This person turned out to be the president of the Hunters Association named Maoi. He greeted everyone present and smiled. Sagu ordered everyone to listen to him and said that the man in front of them was the president, so they had to behave appropriately. But the man was shocked at what he saw and could not believe his eyes. The auditorium was almost empty with only Starfish, Sakura, and Tenku and Hideo left. The president apologized for calling them together so urgently today. On his orders, those absent will be contacted and informed by Sagu. Sagu opened his mouth in shock and then covered his face with his hands. The principal smiled again and decided to cut to the chase. First, he would like to discuss with the hunters about the latest terrorist attack that happened the other day. That terrorist attack was carried out by the Hebikawa. Sprocket thought that this guy had straight up laid a grudge against them, but Tenku thought he only had a big ego and a guild. The director smiled even wider and said that he had information about it. He shocked everyone with the news that they were able to confirm the demons' involvement in this terrorist attack. Sprocket completely failed to understand what demons they were talking about. The director replied that they were the people who live inside the gate and were strangers to them. Tenku already knew that there was advanced life outside the gate, but assumed that it had fallen long ago. It turns out that this land was full of monsters. Hideo thought it was normal that the guy didn't know about it. Hideo explained that they only appeared once 20 years ago. The demons defeated him and never appeared again. Tenku and Sprocket looked questioningly at the old man. Sprocket didn't understand the reason why they weren't aware of this. The fact was that demons looked like humans, but they were actually ruthless monsters. Stargirl was seized with fear and horror when she heard such words. The director said that based on the report of the Igarashi, it was impossible to establish a dialogue with them, and if they announced their existence publicly, there would be people who disagreed with them. Others would surely try to contact them, and since the future was uncertain, henceforth the existence of the demons was under secrecy, and for that reason, only the AES ranks present would know the truth. Tenku didn't understand why they had to participate in this cover-up. The headmaster calmly answered him that it was for the good of the community, and the guy sighed heavily. Sakura remembered the events that happened to her back when she was a child. Back then, demons had killed her parents in front of her eyes. Previously, Sakura thought that her parents were killed by humanoid monsters, but she began to suspect that they might have been demons. Before Sakura could say anything to the principal suggested they move on to the next topic and snapped his finger on his panel. After that, an image of the main character appeared on the big screen and the principal told the audience that the next topic would be about this guy. Sakura was shocked when she saw the Takaru in front of her. The principal said that this guy had single-handedly destroyed the Aoraboros Guild and his name was Kusanagi Takaru. Hideo, Asterisk and Takaru stared intently at the screen. Earlier, Takaru had heard on the news that Hebikawa had been caught by the association. Sagu had answered him that while they had gotten to him, he had already managed to get away, and they had found him through the cameras. Sakura only sighed heavily. The director explained that this guy wasn't a member of the Hunters Association, so they needed to understand what kind of person he was. The director would like to hear information about this guy if those present had any information about him. Stargirl couldn't take her eyes off the mysterious guy named Takaru. A rosy blush appeared on her cheeks. The principal laughed, then sat down in his chair and told Sagu that everyone was silent in the end. Sagu asked the principal what the whole farce was for. The man had already guessed that the director had only called the 4 hunters and invited them to the meeting. Sagu thought he was a bad actor, so his stomach was wiggling from stress at that moment. The director told the man that he had a pretty good game, and he trusted Sagu to keep it a secret. Sagu remained silent and looked at the principal with a frown. The principal meanwhile was smiling as he remembered the look on Sagu's face the moment he walked into the auditorium. Sagu asked the principal to stop remembering it. The man bowed to the principal and said that he would continue to play his role, but for now he was going to deviate. When the principal was alone, he clicked on his screen and the panel brought up several pictures with children. In the pictures you could see Takaru with the rest of the children and there was also an old man in them. The director smirked and thought about what awaited them next. The next day, Sakura didn't seem to be herself. She walked around with puffed up cheeks and thought about Kusanagi. His name had come up at a rather important meeting. It didn't matter how long she had been hiding it, but now it was useless. Sakura thought the guy was rather careless, especially since he was going to hide it himself. But if it was Kusanagi, the girl was sure that he had his reasons. She sent him a message and asked him to contact her as soon as he could. Sakura had to talk to him first. After sending the message, the girl turned around when she heard her name. To her surprise, it was the principal. The principal told Sakura that the incident was because of the foreigners who also poisoned her friend's parents. The association wasn't going to do anything to him, so she didn't have to worry about it. The principal was going to invite him to resolve the situation. Sakura had already realized that she was the only one the principal had told this to. The principal smiled and replied that he told her this for the reason that he and Kusanagi were friends. As they left, the principal admitted that he had kept them friendly. Sakura was left alone in the hallway, thinking about the fact that they could really be friends with Kusanagi. The girl seriously thought about that fact and even closed her eyes to ponder it. Still, she wasn't sure if it was true. She was so interested in this question that she decided to Google what her friends were. She read that friends were people who were open with each other. Sakura felt that their relationship was different from what was written here. While she was agonizing over this question, a girl ran out towards her and called out to her little sister. The happy little girl named Momoji exclaimed that she had come to see the Sakura. She also talked about her grandfather waiting for them in the car. The girl wondered what Sakura was thinking about because her eyes looked pretty big. Sakura grinned and said that she was just thinking. Momiji wiped her tears of joy. Sakura's job was finally allowing them to see each other, for the girl missed her a lot. Sakura was confused by Momiji's sudden tears and, apologizing to her, asked her not to cry. Sakura cheered the girl up and told her that if she forgave her, Sakura would do anything for her. Momiji wiped away the rest of her tears and made sure that Sakura was telling the truth. Sakura smiled and exclaimed that she wasn't lying. Momiji's eyes sparkled with bright stars, and the girl herself opened her mouth in delight and happiness. The happy Momiji immediately handed the surprised Sakura a picture phone and suggested that she go to this place. The next day, the girl went to the shopping center together with Sakura. Meanwhile, the hero was heading home with many bags. It was summer now, after all, and the center was quite crowded. Despite that, he managed to buy a few things. It had only been a week since the incident, and people had already rebuilt the building. Apparently, the restoration maids department from the association had done their best here. In any case, the hero was happy to buy a new phone, because his old one had broken during the battle with Typhon. He also took camping gear and many other things. At some point, a little girl ran out to meet him and exclaimed to the man from outside that she was very happy with the outfit. Momiji was about to take a picture of the Sakura, but ran into the guy on the way. Takeru crouched down on his knee and, after apologizing, extended his hand to the girl. Momiji shook her head negatively and said that it was her fault for doing that. Takeru noticed a familiar ribbon on Momiji's head. At that moment, a frightened Sakura was already running towards them. She was surprised to meet Kusanagi here. The guy smiled and greeted the girl. He assumed that Sakura and her sister were out shopping. In return for the happy greeting, Sakura frowned and said that she had texted him, but he hadn't replied to her for whatever reason. Momiji looked at her sister questioningly and Takeru's eyes reflected consternation. Sakura stared angrily at Takeru and said that she had waited a long time for his reply. Takeru asked her not to be angry because his phone was broken and he wanted to text her right after he bought a new one. Momiji immediately remembered how she watched a romantic drama with her grandmother. Even then, the girl had noticed that the woman was quite scary during her anger. But the grandmother had smiled and said she was just lonely for her favorite jerk. She thought it was too early for the girl to understand such things. Momiji's eyes sparkled. She pointed her finger at Takeru and exclaimed that Takeru was her sister's boyfriend. For a moment, everyone was speechless and looked at the smiling Momiji in silence. As soon as Sakura came to her senses, she exclaimed that it wasn't true at all. But her sister felt that she didn't have to hide it. After all, it was normal for their age. Sakura shook with embarrassment and anger, for she didn't know what to say to Momiji. At some point, a blushing Sakura exclaimed that Takeru was just being her friend. Takeru stared at Sakura in surprise and saw how the girl was confused by her own answer. Sakura uncertainly corrected herself and said that they were mere acquaintances. Momiji assumed that in that case they had not met and were not friends. She looked questioningly at Takeru, expecting him to answer. Takeru replied that Sakura was quite popular at school, and being her friend was a real honor for him. He was just surprised at their sudden meeting. Momiji was delighted, and Sakura blushed at the guy's unexpected statement. The hero decided to back up his response and exclaimed that everyone wanted to be friends with Sakura. Momiji was thrilled that her sister turned out to be so cool. The girl put her hands up and exclaimed that she wanted to know more about her little sister at school, so she suggested that the boy go shopping with them. Takeru was as surprised by such an offer as Sakura, but still couldn't refuse them. The day was quite sunny and clear, just right for a shopping trip. The happy Momiji held Sakura's hand, and Takeru walked beside them. They were having quite a fun time together. Momiji tried on her embarrassed sister's long evening dress. After that, they went to a gun store. Momiji wasn't happy about it, but Sakura and Takeru were delighted. After a while, they passed by lingerie. Sakura blushed and negatively waved her head at her sister, while Takeru stepped back and pretended he didn't see anything. On their way through the mall, Sakura spotted an interesting pavilion on the second floor, but Takeru nudged her forward so she wouldn't linger. After a long shopping session, they grabbed some Momiji ice cream, which the girl was absolutely delighted with, and sat down on a bench to rest. While the boys were resting and shopping, one of the huntresses picked up her cocktail and exclaimed that their patty had gotten B rank. She clashed glasses with her partner and said that their efforts had paid off. The other guy exclaimed that their objectives hadn't changed. One of them was not amused as he had failed with the gate closing. The second girl smiled and asked her Dazai friend to have fun and relax at least for now. The huntress took the tube of her cocktail into her mouth. No sooner had she sipped from it than she saw a Takeru along with a Sakura from around the corner and choked up. The guys immediately thought they were on a date, but then they noticed some kid. They had no idea that a Takeru could be walking with a Sakura. One of the girl's eyes glistened as she thought it was quite romantic. She would really like to hear about their story. Dazai noticed that Mamoru had a rather serious face and asked him about it. He also saw that his friend was shaking and assumed that Mamoru was nervous from the sudden promotion. Mamoru admitted that he didn't like to relax. Dazai exclaimed that Mamoru was too serious. Momiji meanwhile laughed and said that she was having fun here. The girl jumped up on the horse carousel and waved to her sister. Sakura smiled and waved to Momiji, then turned to the hero. She was angry that he had lied earlier about everyone wanting to be friends with Sakura. Takeru felt embarrassed and apologized to her. Still, he didn't think his words were a complete lie. After all he had done, Sakura still didn't think Takeru was bad. In her opinion, Kusanagi fought for the sake of his parents, and she was sure that he was a kind person inside. Meanwhile, the guy was as awkward as possible, and he assumed that Sakura was angry with him. Earlier, the president had told her that he wanted to invite Kusanagi, but he spoke as if he had known him for a long time. Sakura didn't understand the principal's behavior. She also didn't understand who was standing in front of her. Sakura stared at the hero, doubting that he had amnesia. Even if, according to him, they were friends, she knew absolutely nothing about him. Sakura wanted to ask the hero a question, but Kusanagi noticed that the carousel with the horses had stopped. The carousel worker motioned for the others to go through and take their resting places. Takeru looked around, but Momiji still hadn't returned. Sakura was more than a little startled and pronounced that it just couldn't be. While the frightened Sakura along with Takeru searched for Momiji, the girl decided to leave the heroes alone. From the side, she noticed how her sister often looked at the guy. In Momiji's vision, it was completely different. But the girl decided that she would leave them alone so that they could not shy away from her in their love. Momiji decided that she would be their Cupid. On her way, she met a little boy who was sitting in a secluded corner of the street crying. Momiji became curious and decided not to pass him by. The girl approached the crying boy and assumed that he was lost. She smiled at him and suggested that they search for his parents together. While they were in the bushes, passers-by nearby began to notice something amiss. Frightened people rushed in different directions screaming. One of the passers-by shouted that there was a fault here and ordered everyone to save themselves. Momiji noticed the rift and exclaimed that they had to run away from here. She looked back at the frightened little boy who froze in place. Momiji then calmly took his hand. The girl pulled the boy along and reassured him that everything would be all right. She thought that it was not scary and asked him not to let go of her hand. Meanwhile, the frightened Sakura along with Takeru rushed to find her little sister. Sakura looked all around and called desperately for Momiji, but her sister was nowhere to be seen. The girl clutched her head and prayed for her sister to be found, but Takeru asked her to calm down. The hero offered to watch from above, though he thought it would be better to go to the mall and report her missing. Just at that moment, a frightened crowd of people were approaching them that they noticed the hunted Takumi. The panting people exclaimed that they had been saved. They told Sakura and Takumi that a rift had appeared behind them and monsters were coming at them. Sakura didn't know what to say to that, but the people begged her to hurry up and deal with it. Takumi looked at Sakura waiting for her answer. He decided to help the girl and asked people if any of them had seen Takumi's sister. It was a girl of 5 years old, dressed the same as her sister with a bow in her hair. One of the girls recalled that she had probably seen her. Sakura couldn't believe her ears when the girl said about her sister being near the rift. Sakura along with Takeru dropped all their purchases and ran towards the rift. While they were on their way to help the Momiji, the girl along with the boy hid in the bushes so that the huge monster wouldn't notice them. While the boy was in floods of tears, Momiji smiled and said that they were too slow to run away from here. She wanted to comfort the boy and cradled him against her, telling him that everything would be alright. Momiji thought that her sister was pretty strong and she would definitely come to save them. The frightened boy spoke for the first time and looked up at Momiji. The girl exclaimed that it was true, so they would hide here and wait for her. The children noticed someone's shadow looming over them. When the boy raised his head, his eyes reflected immense fear. As Sakura ran to her sister's aid, the events of days gone by ran past her. In the past, her parents had asked Sakura to run away from here. Then in the midst of the battle in the blazing city, they handed her sister to her and asked her to protect her. Her wounded mother smiled and told Sakura that everything would be fine and they would catch up with them soon. Taking her little sister in her arms, Sakura ran forward, looking back at her parents. She couldn't let on that she would lose her as well as her mother and father. Once again, Sakura looked back at her parents, who were killed right in front of her eyes. Takeru called out to Sakura and told her that her sister was here. He looked to his left and called out to Momiji. The girl turned in the same direction, and noticed her sister along with the boy sitting right in front of the monster. Apparently, while running away, they fell to the ground and the creature intended to kill them. Sakura called out to her sister, and the Momiji reached for the girl with her hand. Sakura realized that she needed to get even faster, but she was unable to do so. She could already see the monster's huge hammer almost catching up to her frightened little sister. Sakura screamed her sister's name, and tears of despair welled up in her eyes. But the moment the monster attacked, someone hit it right in the head, preventing it from hurting the Momiji. Takeru was right above Momiji's head and kicked from his opponent's leg. The monster stepped aside, trying to stay on its feet from the hard blow. Takeru warned that they shouldn't have scared those kids. In that case, he thought that the monster would make a bad mascot and used freezing magic on it. A seal appeared under the guy's hand, after which the monster was turned into huge blocks of ice. As soon as the hero landed on the ground, the block of ice split into small pieces along with the enemy. After all that happened, Sakura went with Momiji to run errands, while Takeru waited for them on a bench. Sakura apologized for waiting, and the hero assumed they were done with everything. The girl replied that she had informed the police, and everything was fine. They were also able to find the boy's parents and hand their son over to them. Sakura turned to Kusanagi and thanked him sincerely for everything he had done for them. As a hunter, Sakura knew she had to keep her cool, but in the end Takeru had to use her own strength. For that, she apologized to the guy. The hero asked her not to worry about it, because she could always rely on him. Takeru believed that he was the one who mostly made trouble for her. Momiji walked up to her little brother and thanked him for saving them. Takeru sat down on his lap and asked the girl not to run away from her sister anymore, for Sakura was very worried about her. Momiji felt sorry for this situation. Still, Takeru praised the girl for protecting that boy. Momiji was thrilled that Takeru praised her. But what Sakura was most excited about was that the hero moved like an experienced fighter. Sakura wanted to know who he really was. She didn't want to suspect Takeru of anything and told him so. There was an awkward pause between them, and the guy agreed that Sakura was right. Takeru lowered his gaze, not knowing how to explain everything to Sakura. In the most tense moment, Momiji climbed up on the bench that stood near them. She pushed the adults away from each other and asked the guys not to fight. Momiji thought they needed to make up and offered them a reconciliatory kiss. The girl believed that if they kissed, everything would go away. The hero asked Momiji to calm down a bit and Sakura was at a loss for words. The girl smiled and told the hero that her sister can be too stubborn sometimes and apologized for that. Sakura took Momiji in her arms and offered Takeru to walk home together. On the way back, the hero noticed that Sakura and Momiji seemed to be very close sisters and it seemed quite cute. He smiled and admitted that he was even a little jealous. Sakura admitted that she spoiled her sister sometimes, but the hero thought it was cute as well. The girl looked at her sister who fell asleep in her arms with a smile and said that Momiji was her treasure. Their parents were killed when she was very young, and so Sakura was replacing them. Because of her weakness, Sakura knew that Momiji often felt lonely. To make amends, she decided to become stronger. By becoming a hunter, she followed her goals first and foremost. Sakura believed that if she became stronger, she would be able to protect everyone close to her first and foremost and her sister. Sakura was confused as it sounded rather silly, but the guy understood her perfectly. Takeru had been told earlier that he was more lucky to have muscles than brains. Sakura admitted that she wished she lived in a world where she could breathe easy. In this situation, they weren't getting a break either. Takeru smiled and told the girl that it was in her spirit. The guy thought that he probably wouldn't be able to say it next time, so he wanted to say it now. Takeru was happy that he had met Sakura. Sakura was surprised by his words, but she didn't understand why he was saying that. Takeru thought that he might have his memory back soon. Sakura was shocked to hear that. But if that were to happen, the current memories would most likely just disappear. The guy wanted to say with that in fact, he wasn't really the real Kusanagi Takeru right now. Sakura looked at the Kusanagi sympathetically. It turned out that amnesia was still an ordeal and Takeru could agree with her. Sakura smiled and replied that even if the guy forgot about her, he would still be her friend. Takeru was grateful to her for those words and smiled back. After their awkward conversation, there was once again a pause. Sakura didn't understand what they were supposed to do next as friends. Takeru stared confusedly at the girl who was looking at him with the exact same look. They ended up pulling out their phones and looked on the search engine to see what the friends were. In that case, the hero suggested that she drop the formalities and Sakura did her best to do so. The girl felt a little shaky, but then realized it was most likely from the Momiji. The next day, the hero met with his acquaintance that he wished Kusanagi a good morning. The guy was so glowing with happiness and told the hero that today was super clear weather, but it wouldn't be nice if it rained. The partner assumed that this was the first time Takeru was going to Niigata. He recalled how long ago he had been here. There used to be many delicious eateries here and the grass was even greener. He suggested that the Takeru get down to lifetime. It was Tsubaki's duty to protect her sister, but that was a thing of the past. Now Tsubaki has put everything on Takeru's shoulders. The older sister exclaimed that if he dared to offend her, she would get him from under the ground.